Chapter 9:15. Shen Miao smiled. Luo Shuaiyan did not have any sisters and only brothers, thus she only had a Jiujiu and not an Yimu. Now that there was an Yimu, it was indeed fresh. But looking at Ji Furen's dignified and decent bearing, it seemed that she was a person who knew the situation and spoke very straightforwardly. Shen Miao changed her thoughts and felt that it was so, otherwise how could Ji Yushu's temperament be raised? Ji Furen pulled Shen Miao's hand and said as they walked to the other side, "Today Jing Xing and Xingji will go to the inner field to hunt and you will wait outside with me. When the sun has set, they should be back. At that time, the two of you can go to the Ji residence and have a meal together. Speaking of which, ever since Jing Xing came back this time, he has not come to our residence for a meal." Shen Miao smiled and complied. In a blink of an eye, she thought of Xia Jingxing and suddenly became somewhat worried and asked, "Yunmu, is the fight in the inner field dangerous or not? One fear that it is not easy to hunt a male lion." Ji Furen sighed, "These are the rules that were set since the founding of the country. After so many years, it was originally going to be abolished but at the end the late emperor." Her tone suddenly paused and looked at Shen Miao before smiling, "You do not need to worry as there is still the imperial guards. Even though the beasts are fierce, those guards are not to be trifled with. Moreover both of them have martial arts and are not idle people without the strength to truss a chicken. Their self-protection skills are more than enough." When Shen Miao heard it, she also smiled but her heart was thinking that it seemed that Ji Furen did not know about it. If she knew about it, she would definitely not show such a relaxed expression. Those imperial guards were also not as safe as they looked on the surface. Ji Furen was not a person who could discuss things and Shen Miao was somewhat regretful at this moment. She should have called Pei Lang along so that at least things could still be discussed. She did not have any acquaintances in Longyi and did not know anything about Xia Jingxing's arrangements, so it would not be good to rashly make arrangements. At the edge of the outer field far away from the bushes, there was an arbor that was set up immediately. Because the ones who came today were the nobility, there were a lot of ice cubes that were brought over. At this moment it was very cool and some of the young ladies and Furens were sitting inside, drinking tea and eating snacks. Occasionally they would see their own family members coming back with some game and would feel excited as they cheered and jumped up to show off. In the end, he treated it as a new form of entertainment. Shen Miao's heart however gradually sunk as she looked at the misty Hua Uwan peak in the distance. The Hua Uwan peak was steep and one could not see the end of it. Everyone here were chatting happily, but who knew if there was a life and death struggle going on inside? Or was it some kind of fierce battle? Was the prey really just a lion or a golden dragon from the 9 heavens? Just as she was thinking, someone walked over from the opposite side. Shen Miao looked up and saw that it was the astute Madame Yi. Madame Yi walked to Madame Ji's side and sat down. She looked at Madame Ji and smiled, "Why didn't you go in as well?" "How could I know how to hunt? I'm just watching." Madame Ji also laughed. Although the Ji family and the Yi family did not have much contact, they still had to give face. After all, Yi Maocai's official position was not much different from Ji's was. In fact, it might even be slightly higher. Madame Ji asked, "Even Madame Yi is not going in?" "I will not go." Madame Yi waved her hands, "My body is weak and cannot stand the jolting of the horse." Her gaze landed on Shen Miao and said, "Why did Qin Wang Fei not go in? Did you not see Prince Qin Wang accompanying Qin Wang Fei to go in? Why did you not play a little longer?" Shen Miao's heart moved. Madame Ye's words seemed to be probing something. Could it be that she knew a little about what happened in the inner field today? The Lu and Yi family's status in Longyi was subtle and it was worth paying attention to. She said, "The sun was too strong and the outer field made me dizzy so I came back first." She then put on a slightly disgusted look, "Moreover, I do not like to see scenes of killing." Chapter 9:16. Ji Furen smiled, "Princess Rui is soft-hearted but it is not surprising. Even an ordinary female would not be willing to see a rabbit being killed. Seemingly afraid that Yi Furan would continue to interrogate Shen Miao, Ji Furan deliberately changed the topic and asked Yi Furan, "Speaking of which, I heard that young Master Yi suffered from pain a few days ago. Is it better?" Young Master Yi naturally referred to the son that was given birth by the concubine of the Yi family and brought up under Yi Furan's name. When Yi Furan heard this, she said, "It is still all right. It is an old problem. When it rains, it would be very painful. There is no solution even after so many years." Her tone was indifferent. Shen Miao later found out from Octagon Jiao that this young Master Yi was the son of the Yi family on the surface. The servants were very respectful to him, but secretly they felt that he did not have a future. Yi Furan only treated him on the surface but never really cared about him. Shen Miao felt that this young Master Yi that she had never met was a little pitiful. Ji Furan and Yi Furan continued to pull each other. Most likely it was to divert Yi Furan's attention. In the end, Yi Furan seemed to be somewhat impatient and got up to leave. Shen Miao and Ji Furan then sat together and waited. The sun gradually set, but there was still no sign of Emperor Yonglu and Xie Jingxing. Shen Miao instructed Mo Qing, "Go and inquire if there is any news of them." Ji Furan smiled, "Do not worry. There have been times like this before. Due to the need for patience in hunting, time passes in a flash. The path to Hualuan Peak is too steep and it is not easy to walk after dark. One would have to wait until the next day to return." Even though she said so, the slight anxiety in her eyes was captured by Shen Miao. Shen Miao did not know if she was too sensitive. If she did not know about Xie Jingxing's previous matters, she would really be at ease. But this time she already had a bad premonition and knew that Xie Jingxing's trip was not as easy as it looked on the surface. Her heart tightened. After the sun set, the sky gradually darkened. The emperor had not returned. Other than a few young ladies and womenfolk who had already returned, the officials were still around the hunting grounds. Shen Miao asked Ji Furan if this was the first time such a situation occurred. Ji Furan replied, "Not really, but it was very rare in the past." Some of the officials had already set up camp, using long cloth to make something like a tent. Even though it was summer, there would still be dew in the night, so they were afraid of catching a cold. The Ji family also made such a tent. Shen Miao was still walking outside when she saw Lu Wan'er standing not far away and talking to a middle-aged man. It seemed like she was acting coquettishly or pleading, but the man was unmoved. Immediately after, Lu Wan'er was forcefully pulled onto the carriage and escorted away by a group of guards. Lu Wan'er probably wanted to stay here, but this man didn't allow it. Shen Miao was about to leave when the man seemed to feel Shen Miao's gaze and suddenly turned his head, revealing a fiendish face. He was tall and sturdy like a bear. His face was bloodthirsty and he seemed to have a violent temper. He looked at Shen Miao with a gloomy gaze. Octagon Anise said, "That's the master of the Lu family, General Lu Jingchun." Shen Miao suddenly realized that this was Lu Wan'er's father, the military general of the Lu family. Then she was surprised. As a military general, Shen Xian was also very valiant, but he did not look as ruthless as this person. It was as if he could not conceal the murderous intent in his heart. He was a natural god of death. Shen Miao previously found it strange that Lu Furan, Lu Wan'er and Jing Fei did not look smart. How did the Lu family maintain such a reputation and status in Longyi? Now that she saw Lu Jingchun, she understood. With such a god of death, it was no wonder that Emperor Yonglu could not easily make a move against the Lu family. Lu Jingchun staying here, could it be that he was also waiting for a result on Wanhua Peak? Shen Miao pondered. Her gaze swept past Lu Jingchun and she turned to leave. Chapter 917. The Lu family and Madame Yi were here. Yi Maokai had also returned and was discussing something with Madame Yi. Both the Lu and Yi families were present. If something really happened to Emperor Yonglu here, the Lu and Yi families would not take the opportunity to do something disgraceful. Looking around, Some of the officials had already entered their tents and were chatting with their wives. They treated this hunt as a fun game. They were only waiting for Emperor Yonglu and Xie Jingxing to bring back the lion as an offering for the ceremony. Shen Miao stopped and looked at the sky. The stars were quiet and the summer breeze was refreshing. But was this night really as peaceful as it looked? Ji Furen called her, "Jiao Nyang, it's cold outside. Come into the tent." Shen Miao smiled and went in. Master Ji was not in the tent. The officials sat together in groups of 3 or 5, drinking and chatting. It was a rare moment of leisure and they relaxed. Ji Furen poured a cup of hot tea for Shen Miao and said, "Don't worry, they will be fine. But you, if you catch a cold and Jingxing questions me, I will not be able to bear the responsibility." Shen Miao smiled and said, he wouldn't dare. She then thought of something and hesitated before saying, His Highness's relationship with the late emperor did not seem to be very good? Hearing this, Ji Furen was stunned. She smiled and said, "Why did you suddenly ask about the late emperor?" Even though Ji Furen tried her best to conceal it, Shen Miao could still feel the flash of hatred in Ji Furen. Shen Miao had always been curious about the late emperor's role in Xie Jingxing and Emperor Yong Li's lives in the Longyi court. Since Ji Furen and the late empress were sisters, she must have some understanding of the late emperor. Could she get some information about the late emperor from Ji Furen? Shen Miao did not hide it and said, "I heard His Highness mention a little but it was not clear. I just felt it was strange." Ji Furen looked at her in surprise and said, "I did not expect him to tell you about this." She then smiled and said, "In the end, this is Jingxing's family matter. If I tell you, it will not be good. Another day, you can sit with Jingxing and tell him honestly. Then you will know the details." This meant that she was not willing to say. But because of Ji Furen's attitude, Shen Miao's heart confirmed her conjecture. Thinking about it, the late emperor really did not get along with the Xie Jingxing brothers. Looking at Ji Furen's attitude, she probably did not treat the late empress' paternal family very well. Thinking about all these in her heart, Ji Furen also sank into contemplation and only reacted after a long time before speaking to Shen Miao, "Ai. Everything is fine, so there is no need to mention about these. Jiao Nyang, you should also sleep for a while. What if they come back tomorrow morning and you are tired instead? What if you hurt your body? How would Shen Miao be able to sleep at this time?" She had her mind on the matter and said, "I will sit for a while more. Anyway, I cannot sleep." Seeing her stubbornness, Madame Ji did not continue to persuade her. After talking for a while, Ji Furen felt tired. She was not as young as Shen Miao and could not stay up all night, so after a while she dozed off in the tent. Shen Miao covered her with the cloak and sat in the tent. Who knew that she would sit for an entire night? The morning light was bright and there were sounds of birds and beasts chirping coming from the distant forest. Master Ji was drinking with his colleagues at the other end yesterday and had already sobered up. He walked towards the tent and coincidentally met Shen Miao opening the tent door to leave. Unconsciously surprised, Shen Miao smiled at him and said, "Yumu has not woken up and is currently sleeping. Yufu's voice should be softer." Master Ji nodded his head and said to her, "Go and eat something first." Chapter 9:18. Shen Miao complied and walked out on her own. Some of the Furens outside had already woken up and their expressions showed their fatigue. They were all noble people, so it was impossible for them to make do with their tents. Those who were especially pampered had already returned to their residences last night, and those who stayed behind were either to fawn on Emperor Yonglu or to experience this rare leisure time. Fennel served a bowl of porridge to Shen Miao. When Emperor Yonglu came out, a few chefs from the palace came over to specially cook for these officials and womenfolk. As Shen Miao drank the porridge, she asked Octagonal Anise, "Is there still no news from His Highness?" Octagonal Anise shook his head. Shen Miao looked into the distance. The sun had already emerged from the top of the mountain and after another 2 hours, the sky would be completely bright. Even if Xie Jingxing and the rest spent a night on the mountain, they should be back by now. There was no precedent of hunting on the mountain for an entire 2 days. Although they did not just hunt. Is there no signal in your MOU army? Shen Miao asked. This time your master did not discuss with you about the matter. Once the matter is successful, what signal will be released to inform? Octagonal Anise and Fennel were surprised for a moment before they looked at each other and shook their heads at the same time. Fennel said, Master did not tell these 2 servants about the plan this time. Shen Miao was helpless and could only say, one do not know what is the situation now. Looking at Lu Jingchun who was stretching his waist and Yi Mao Kai at the other end, she felt a headache. Just as she was thinking, she saw a familiar figure walking past from the other end. Shen Miao was surprised for a moment and could not care about eating the porridge anymore. She placed the bowl in Octagonal Anisa's hands and quickly chased up to that person. That person turned back and it was Ji Yushu. Shen Miao's heart was filled with 1,000 thoughts, so she pulled Ji Yushu to a corner where no one could see and asked him, why did you come back? Ji Yushu asked, what is sister-in-law's meaning? Shen Miao frowned, are you not with Xie Jingxing? Ji Yushu was surprised, no. I am in the outer field and only the imperial family can enter the inner field. Even though I am half a relative of the imperial family, I am still not qualified. Shen Miao found it strange. She thought that Ji Yushu came over to help Xie Jingxing. Now that Ji Yushu did not go, could it be that Xie Jingxing and Emperor Yonglu were going to fight one-on-one? She said, tell me honestly, what does Xie Jingxing want to do this time? Ji Yushu touched his nose in grievance, sister-in-law, you really asked the wrong person. Whenever third brother wanted to do something big, he would never bring me along. The more dangerous it was, the more he wouldn't let me touch it. Initially in Mingqi, I was only in charge of the Feng Xian pawn shop's food and drink, and did not allow me to intervene in other matters. Yesterday at the hunting ground, Gao Yang was with him. Third brother always brings Gao Yang along if there's anything. I wanted to follow, but third brother wouldn't let me. Gao Yang? Shen Miao asked, Gao Yang is also an official, how will he go? Gao Yang disguised himself as third older brother's personal attendant and followed along. Ji Yushu said, he is quick-witted and knows medical skills, so if anything happens, he would be able to help. Shen Miao's heart tightened. Gao Yang had medical skills, so Xie Jingxing brought it along with him, but could it be that the situation was so dangerous? She then looked at Ji Yushu and understood in her heart. Even though Xie Jingxing's mouth was bad, he was extremely protective in his bones. In any case, Ji Yushu was his Biao younger brother, just like Su Mingfeng in the past. The best way to protect Ji Yushu was not to involve him, and perhaps it was to protect the Ji family. Ji Yushu looked at Shen Miao's expression and this time he became smarter. He asked, sister-in-law, is it that something happened to third older brother? Shen Miao said, no. It is just that I see that he did not return for a long time and my heart is anxious. Chapter 919. Impossible. Ji Yushu said resolutely and decisively, sister-in-law is not a person who has no sense of propriety. You were just too strange just now. Yesterday I went to look for Gao Yang, but Gao Yang was also mysterious. Every time something happens to them, it was still all right when they were in Mingqi, but after returning to Longyi, he drew a clear line with me. Could it be that he wanted to do something by himself? Shen Miao looked at Ji Yushu's flustered and exasperated look and her heart sighed with sorrow. Xie Jingxing was used to putting aside the surrounding people and bear everything by himself, such as the Marquis of Linan, Princess Rong Xian and Su Mingfeng in the Ding capital. Now it was Ji Yushu's turn, but some things were indeed a blessing in disguise. She said, sorry, I am unable to answer you because I also do not know what he wants to do. Hunting in the inner field, only the imperial family can enter. Could it be that there is danger? Ji Yushu said, third older brother and his majesty are always strange. Sister-in-law, you really do not know? Do not know what? Without waiting for Shen Miao to answer, a female voice was heard from behind and it was Ji Furen walking over. One did not know how long she had been listening here. She looked at Ji Yushu and then looked at Shen Miao, and her expression became strange. She said, "What happened to Xing Ji and Jing Xing? What do you mean by what you just said?" Ji Furen originally wanted to call Shen Miao over to return to the city with her, but who knew that she coincidentally saw Shen Miao grabbing Ji Yushu over. Star Anise and Fennel were busy guarding Lu Chun and Yi Mao Kai, and did not guard against Ji Furen, but Ji Furen heard the conversation between Shen Miao and Ji Yushu. Ji Yushu said, "Mother, nothing much. I am playing with sister-in-law. Don't try to fool your mother." Ji Furen looked at Ji Yushu and said angrily, "Initially let you go to Ming Qi to look for Jing Xing, but you did not return. One do not know what you are doing in Ming Qi. I do not care what you do, but you are after all the young master of the Ji family. I ask you, what do you know? Why did you say those words? Jing Xing and Xing Ji. Is there danger?" Ji Yushu was speechless from his mother's words and looked at Shen Miao for help. Shen Miao quickly said, "Imu, you have misunderstood. Yushu and I were just playing." It was just that His Highness did not return at this time and his heart was somewhat anxious, so he asked Yushu. "Yushu does not know anything and it was I who thought too much. Yumu must not blame him." Ji Furen looked at Shen Miao again and her eyes were a little stern. "Jiao Nyang, this matter is not a small matter." As they were talking, Octagonal Anise suddenly ran over. He ignored Madame Ji's presence and said, "Madam, they're back. His Majesty has left the mountain." It was as if Ji Yushu was granted amnesty and quickly said to Ji Furen, "Look. Mother, don't let your imagination run wild. Let's go see the lion that third brother and His Majesty are hunting." Finished speaking, she ran away. When Shen Miao heard that Emperor Yonglu and his entourage had returned, she heaved a sigh of relief and smiled at Ji Furen, "Let's go over too." Ji Furen still wanted to say something, but when she saw Shen Miao's calm expression, she swallowed her words and sighed, allowing Shen Miao to pull her over. One saw a group of imperial guards walking out from the outside and the person leading them was Emperor Yonglu. But what was strange was that Emperor Yonglu did not ride a horse but walked by himself. Those with sharp eyes could see that the sword at Emperor Yongli's waist seemed to be a little blood red. But for the imperial family hunt, it was said that the emperor personally came to hunt, but in reality it was an animal etiquette. How could it make the emperor risk his life to go? It was only the guards pointing arrows at the side and the emperor would instruct. And now the meaning was that Emperor Yonglu personally took action. Emperor Yongli's expression was as usual and one could not tell whether he was happy or angry. Imperial concubine Jing waited in the carriage for a long time and immediately went up to greet him lovingly. "Your Majesty finally came out. This concubine had waited here bitterly for an entire night and even my eyes are red." Emperor Yonglu only glanced at her faintly and did not reply. Shen Miao could see clearly that Yi Maocai's expression was normal, but Lu Jingchun was somewhat gloomy. The imperial guards at the back dumped the things that the horses were pulling onto the ground with a bang, instantly causing the surrounding womenfolk to exclaim. That thing was not anything else but the corpse of a huge lion. It was stained with blood and there were numerous arrow holes on its back and abdomen. It seemed that it had gone through a fierce battle. Immediately, there were courtiers who flattered and came forward to congratulate, "Your Majesty is wise and mighty. It is the fortune of our great Liang." Everyone followed suit and followed along as they knelt down to sing praises. Shen Miao also followed and knelt down. Emperor Yonglu indicated for everyone to rise. But Shen Miao did not see Xia Jingxing's figure. After everyone rose, Lu Jingchun suddenly spoke, "Your Majesty, why is there only Your Majesty and no trace of His Highness Prince Rui?" It seemed that everyone just remembered that Prince Rui was not present. Emperor Yonglu stared closely at Lu Jingchun, his eyes as cold as ice. "Prince Rui is injured and has returned from the other side to the city for treatment." Everyone was in an uproar. Chapter 920. Shen Miao's heart tightened. As long as Xie Jingxing was able to conceal it slightly, he would most likely act as if nothing had happened, and Emperor Yonglu would not say the matter of Prince Rui being injured in front of the Lu and Yi families. But at this moment, Emperor Yonglu did not hide anything. Did this mean that this matter was so serious that it could not be concealed? Ji Furen stood beside Shen Miao and immediately held Shen Miao's hand tightly. Most likely she was afraid that Shen Miao would be anxious and even advised her, "It is hard to avoid friction in this hunting ground. Most likely he was accidentally injured somewhere. With so many guards protecting, it should be fine." But her face was filled with worry. Shen Miao did not want Ji Furen to panic, so she responded to her, but her heart did not think so. Since Emperor Yonglu let Xie Jingxing leave the city first and did not let Xie Jingxing be exposed in front of these officials, then Xie Jingxing's injury would definitely not be as simple as a small friction. She looked around and did not see Xie Jingxing, Tai Yi, and the rest. She was even more anxious. Emperor Yonglu did not seem to want to speak more, and even though he had hunted this lion, his expression did not seem to be happy. Everyone guessed Prince Rui's injury but knew that Emperor Yonglu was not happy this time. Everyone knew that Prince Rui and Emperor Yonglu had a close relationship, and no matter if Prince Rui's injury was serious or not, the two of them would go to the inner field together. The one injured was Prince Rui, so Emperor Yonglu would definitely not be happy. Because of this, no one dared to talk to Emperor Yonglu at this moment. Even Jing Fei put away her arrogance and carefully waited at the side. Since the lion was hunted, everyone naturally did not need to stay on the hunting ground. Emperor Yonglu had to return to the palace, and the families of the officials also had to return to their residences. When everyone was being careful, Lu Zhengchun had to ask about Emperor Yongli's 60th year ceremony as if nothing had happened. Emperor Yonglu usually still had some face towards Lu Zhengchun, but today he scoffed coldly and left with a flick of his sleeves. The officials were well aware of that unhappy attitude and whispered to each other. Lu Zhengchun was not only not angry, he seemed to be somewhat happy, which made that fiendish face look extremely terrifying. Shen Miao also rushed back to the residence of Prince Rui as she was worried about Xie Jingxing's injuries. Ji Furen and Ji Yushu also wanted to go, but Shen Miao shook her head. "This matter is not clear yet, and one feared that it is not that simple. If Yi Mu and Yushu go now, it would be easy for others to exploit the loophole. I will first go back to take a look at what exactly is going on. Yu Mu and Yushu will come over when His Highness is better." Pausing, she then said, "The more it is at this time, the more one must not panic." Even though Ji Yushu and Ji Furen did not understand the ins and outs of this matter, they were after all people who had rolled in the whirlpool of imperial power and slowly felt out the meaning in Shen Miao's words. Ji Darren deeply agreed with Shen Miao's words, thus Ji Yushu and Ji Furen no longer followed. The few of them parted ways, and Shen Miao, Mo Qing and entourage immediately rushed towards the residence of Prince Rui without stopping. Star Anise and Fennel comforted Shen Miao. "Furen, do not worry. Master's martial arts are not weak. An average person would not be able to hurt him. Perhaps this is Master's plan, to confuse the enemy." Shen Miao shook her head. "I do not feel good in my heart." It was more than bad, it was as if something was tugging at her heart. This feeling made her feel very uneasy, and she could not wait to appear in the residence of Prince Rui the next moment to see what situation Xie Jingxing was in. Star Anise and Fennel looked at each other in dismay and did not make a sound. When they reached the residence of Prince Rui, Shen Miao got off the carriage and directly walked towards the residence's doors. The guards at the door quickly let her in, and when Shen Miao stepped in, she found that the residence was strangely quiet. Chapter 921. If it was in the past, Uncle Tang would have come up early to greet her and call her Furen back to send some sweet soup, but today there was not a single person. Shen Miao's heart became anxious and did not say anything further as she walked towards the courtyard. Coincidentally, she saw Uncle Tang pacing back and forth at the door of the room with a worried look. Shen Miao's heart thumped and Uncle Tang just happened to see her. Shen Miao immediately went up and did not say anything else to him but asked, "How is he?" "His Highness's injuries are very serious and Gentleman Gao is currently treating him." Uncle Tang sighed with a worried look, "I have not seen His Highness like this for a long time." Shen Miao thought about it before pushing the door and walking in. Upon entering the room, she could smell a strong smell of blood. Tai Yi, who was beside Xie Jingxing, was also inside and was silently twisting a handkerchief. The blood in the basin was enough to make one's heart jump. Gao Yang's brows were tightly locked, and when he saw Shen Miao entering, he was slightly surprised before saying, "You. Do you understand now?" Shen Miao walked quickly to the bedside. Xie Jingxing's eyes were closed, his face was like paper and his lips were pale. His clothes on the upper half of his body were pulled apart and there were layers of arrow wounds on his abdomen. The deepest was a knife mark and it was different from the last time Shen Miao saw it. This knife mark was obviously new, but because it happened to cover the old wounds, it was like the old wounds had not healed and the new wounds were added, making it very deep. And what made Shen Miao's heart turn cold was that the blood around the wound was purple. She pointed at Xie Jingxing's wound and her voice was somewhat unsteady, "This, dipped in poison." Gao Yang straightforwardly cut off her words. Shen Miao was like being struck by lightning. After a moment, she calmed her mind, "You can cure it?" Gao Yang shook his head. "This is not a single poison but a mixture of several poisons. If I want to cure it, I must first distinguish what kind of poison it is. This will take some time, but his wounds can't wait that long. If it cannot wait that long, then think of a way to make him wait. In short, his life is in your hands and there cannot be any mistakes." Shen Miao shouted sharply. Gao Yang was stunned. He knew that Shen Miao was not as gentle and kind as she looked on the surface, but it was the first time he saw Shen Miao speaking so harshly, as if she was a superior commanding her subordinates. Even Tai Yi was stunned. He had always felt that even though this future young Furen was intelligent and could be considered scheming, but her attitude was too soft. Usually she would have a warm smile and lack some ruthlessness. If she was to accompany Xie Jingxing, she would inevitably become a burden in the future. Now seeing Shen Miao's appearance, it made him think of the late emperor who had passed away. Shen Miao took a deep breath and calmed her emotions before asking Gao Yang, "How many days can he hold on now? How many days do you need to cure his poison?" "He can hold on for 7 days at most, but I'll need at least half a month to cure the poison." For the first time, Gao Yang revealed an expression of helplessness and even resignation. The most urgent matter now is that he cannot hold on for 7 days as his old injuries have relapsed. Shen Miao looked at Xie Jingxing. When he was lying on the bed, he looked very quiet, just like a noble young master who was asleep. However, this kind of arrogant, as if he was living the life of a superior person, was hiding a lot of swords, spears, rain of swords and killing. Last time when Shen Miao looked at Xie Jingxing's body, she saw that there were many old injuries on his body. She suddenly thought of something and said to Gao Yang, "Wait a moment." She then walked out of the room and into another room. Jingzhe and Guyu were waiting outside. That day both of them did not follow to the hunting grounds and waited in the residence for Shen Miao, but the seriously injured Xie Jingxing came over. They were originally flustered and now they were afraid that Shen Miao would overthink and wanted to say a few words of comfort, but they saw Shen Miao running straight to the dressing table and took out a small box from the drawer at the bottom of the dressing table and opened it. Chapter 922. In that box, there was a round thing and a medicine bottle. Shen Miao grabbed the medicine bottle and hurried back to Gao Yang's room. She handed the medicine bottle to Gao Yang and said, "There are 3 yuan gathering pills here. Is it possible to help him?" In that box was the dowry that Luo Tan and Feng and Ning gave when Shen Miao got married. Luo Tan gave a compass while Feng and Ning gave 3 yuan pills. The Yuan gathering pill was something that could help extend one's life and could let a dying person have one more breath. It was difficult for Feng and Ning to give 3 of the good things that the great medical scholar of Ming Qi left behind. Shen Miao suddenly remembered that she did not know if this thing would be useful for Xie Jing. Xing Gao Yang was delighted. Where did you get it from? She took the medicine bottle and poured out 1 pill to take a closer look and sniffed it before saying, correct. It is the Yuan gathering pill. It is useful. With this, he would be able to hold on for about 10 days. Shen Miao sighed in relief and heard Gao Yang speaking again, but within 10 days, I might not be able to research out the antidote. No matter if you are able to research it out or not, you have to give it a try. If it is not possible, then we will talk about it at that time. Now that you are a physician, do not bother about the matter of not being able to. She said coldly. Tai Yi and Uncle Tang who followed along looked at Shen Miao in surprise. They did not think that at this time, a female like her would be able to keep her composure. In fact, Shen Miao was not as calm as she looked on the surface, but at this time, it would not be of any use to panic. She needed to clear her mind and think about what to do next. Gao Yang nodded his head. I will now perform acupuncture on him, and with the Yuan gathering pill, let him temporarily settle down. All of you go out first. Shen Miao glanced at Xie Jingxing and her heart seemed to be tightly gripped by something before she walked out. After walking out, she said to Uncle Tang, all of you leave first. I want to be alone for a while. Uncle Tang wanted to say something but hesitated and finally said, no matter what, Furen must take care of your body. These old servants will do their best to cooperate with Furen. Shen Miao complied. Tai Yi and Uncle Tang also left. After dismissing Jing Zhe and the rest, Shen Miao stood outside the door and looked at the courtyard, feeling extremely tired. After a while, she sat down on the steps in the courtyard. The weather in June was already hot, especially in the Great Liang where it was hot early, but the ground was cool and the wind was rustling, so Shen Miao actually felt some coldness. She thought, if something really happened to Xie Jingxing, what should she do? It seemed that she should think about her future life and what she had to do in the future. This was the rational thing that she should do. But at this moment, she actually couldn't persuade herself to analyze the future rationally, as if those results were something she didn't even want to think about. Since when did Xie Jingxing's position in her heart become so important? So important that when she thought of losing this person in the future, she felt that the remaining time was somewhat dull. If he had never tasted honey, he should have been able to endure it. However, after tasting it and then losing it, everything became unacceptable. She heard someone's footsteps. She didn't know when Pei Lang had walked into the courtyard. Seeing her sitting on the steps, he also sat down. Hesitating for a moment, she then said, don't worry, he is a prince of the Great Liang, it won't be that easy for something to happen to him. Shen Miao was silent. Her eyes were slightly dim and Pei Lang felt that his mouth was astringent and his heart was sour. Speaking of which, he had never seen Shen Miao like this before. Shen Miao always had a well-thought-out plan in front of Pei Lang and her imposing manner was high, as if she wanted to suppress him. When Pei Lang was locked up in the dungeon of Prince Ding's residence, he had also thought if Shen Miao would feel guilty and worry about his life and death. When Shen Miao was worried about someone, what was she like? Now he finally saw it. When Shen Miao was worried about someone's life and death, there were no aggressive thorns and she was no different from an ordinary female. Chapter 923. He always felt that Shen Miao was sitting very close to him, but the distance between them seemed to be thousands of miles apart. Pei Lang said, go back to the room. The wind is strong. No need. Shen Miao looked outside, your body is not fully recovered. Do not need to care about me. Go back and rest first. Pei Lang was silent for a moment before saying, I will accompany you. Shen Miao was too lazy to persuade him. At this moment her mind was not on Pei Lang and was only concerned about Xie Jingxing's injuries. Gao Yang was busy for the entire night. Shen Miao also sat for the entire night. Speaking of which, that night in the hunting grounds while waiting for Xia Jingxing's news, Ji Furen dozed off but Shen Miao did not sleep. She also did not close her eyes for 2 days but she was full of energy. When the rooster crowed thrice, Gao Yang opened the door and walked out. When he saw Shen Miao and Pei Lang sitting on the steps, he could not help but be slightly surprised. You too sat for the entire night? Shen Miao rubbed her numb knees and asked Gao Yang, how is he? It is temporarily stabilized. The effect of the yuan gathering pill is not bad. Next I will be in the room researching the method to detoxify the poison. No one is to disturb me. He looked at Shen Miao again. These days he will be entrusted to you to take care of him. Uncle Tang, who heard the news, could not help but ask, then if you do not come out after 10 days, Gao Yang did not speak and the atmosphere in the room suddenly became heavy. You go. In the silence, Shen Miao opened her mouth. Her voice was very calm, as if the person on the bed who was on the verge of death was not her husband. Gao Yang looked at her seriously. I also hope to succeed. If not, I will not be happy for the rest of my life. He turned and left. Uncle Tang looked at Shen Miao before looking at Pei Lang and said, Furen, Gentleman Pei, you two have been keeping watch for the entire night and have not eaten anything. Currently Master's condition has stabilized. It is better to eat something first and rest. Do not let Master's injuries recover but you two fall sick from exhaustion. Shen Miao nodded her head and said, bring it to the room. I will rest here for a while and it will be convenient to take care of him. Also send someone to Ji Furen's side to pass a message that His Highness's condition is temporarily stabilized but he has not woken up. Do not come over for the time being. Uncle Tang nodded his head. Pei Lang looked at Shen Miao and saw that Shen Miao had already walked to the chair in front of the bed and sat down. His eyes dimmed and he turned to leave. Guyu quickly brought a bowl of porridge over and Shen Miao let her close the door on the way out. There was only Shen Miao, the unconscious Xia Jingxing and Tai Yi left in the room. While eating, she asked Tai Yi, what's going on? Can you tell me now? Tai Yi hesitated. Shen Miao stopped what she was doing and stared at him sternly. That day you followed him into the inner field so no one is clearer than you about what happened. Even if you only recognize him as your master, you can't hide it from me. Tai Yi hurriedly said, no, madam. It's just that this subordinate is not very clear about master's plan this time. Because it was the emperor who discussed with mistress, even the MOU army was not used. But there seemed to be some changes midway. The emperor's life was hanging by a thread and someone was mixed in the imperial guards to ambush him. Master was seriously injured because he blocked the knife for the emperor and that knife was coated with poison. Someone wanted to take the emperor's life. In that instant, it was as if some beads were finally connected together and there was a vague answer to the conjecture in Shen Miao's mind. This hunt was actually a game between Emperor Yonglu and the Lu family or perhaps the Lu family. Emperor Yonglu wanted to use his own life to bring down the entire Lu family and the Lu family wanted to take the opportunity to deal with Emperor Yonglu but did not know that Emperor Yonglu had already made up his mind to die. Chapter 924. But Emperor Yonglu did not inform Xia Jingxing of this plan of mutual destruction, or it could be said that Emperor Yonglu knew that Xia Jingxing would not agree to it, thus Xia Jingxing said that there was a change in the plan. In order to save Emperor Yongli's fate, Xia Jingxing suffered such a heavy injury. Shen Miao silently looked at the youth lying on the bed. He was usually arrogant and mischievous and was good at grasping everything in the palm of his hands. De Qian's schemes were lifted up high and lightly dropped by him, covered in a careless smile. Because he was always used to showing off his strength, it made people forget that from a certain perspective, he was also an ordinary person and would also die of old age. Once he was injured, he would be in danger and there was even a possibility that he would completely disappear from this world. Shen Miao's heart suddenly felt pain as she recalled the sentence, wait for my return, that Xie Jingxing said to her before entering the hall. Looking at the scene in front of her again, she felt that it was extremely ironic. Moreover, the effect of the Yuan pill would not last long, and if Gao Yang was unable to research the antidote in 10 days, what would happen? Shen Miao frowned as she looked at Xie Jingxing, and her nails gradually dug into her palms. If it could not be done in front of him, then the main culprit would make him taste 10 times the pain. In Wei Yang Palace, Emperor Yonglu fiercely threw the booklet in his hands onto the floor. Empress Xian sighed and bent down to pick up the booklet. His Lu family's guts are big enough and their hearts are wild enough. The emperor's face was as heavy as water. At this time they are still flaunting their prowess in front of Zhen. Zhen cannot wait to skin him and drink his blood. The Lu family used their power to commit crimes, and this time they even took a risk out of desperation. If not for Jingxing sacrificing his life to protect. Empress Xiande did not continue speaking. Hearing this, a flash of pain appeared in Emperor Yongli's eyes. Zhen can't wait for Zhen to die. Jingxing is a child that values relationships and righteousness. The emperor obviously knows that he would not agree. That is why one did not tell him at the start. In other words, even if the emperor arranged everything, it might not make Jingxing happy, and to him it would be a shackle. The emperor did not even consider his feelings. Empress Xiande's words were sharp, but she didn't give Emperor Yonglu any face. Emperor Yonglu was already in a bad mood, and when he heard this, he was almost enraged. Your Majesty, you don't have to be angry. Jingxing hasn't woken up yet. The most important thing right now is to complain. Empress Xiande reminded him when she saw him like this. Emperor Yonglu closed his eyes and said, I know. I only have this one brother. Gao Yang is taking care of Jingxing's injuries, and there is no news from Prince Rui's residence. But Your Majesty, the more important thing is that the Lu family has started to take action. I know. Emperor Yongli's lips curled up slightly. His current appearance was 70 to 80% similar to the usual Xie Jingxing. He was clearly smiling, but one could feel his coldness and danger. He said, he wanted to deal with me. Since I didn't die, it's my turn to deal with him. Military power. Everyone has it. The Lu family has lived for a long time. This time if Xie Yuan is not well, I want the entire Lu family to be buried with him. He paused and said word by word, if Xie Yuan were to recover, they would have no way to escape. Empress Xiande nodded her head slightly and looked at the sky outside. Outside the imperial palace in June, the sun was shining brightly just now, but now it was overcast with dark clouds. In the end, the heavens were going to change. In the Gao family residence. Gao Yang had just returned to the residence when he heard an aggressive voice, Gao Yang, you are clearly a great Liang's Longyi people but lied to me that you are from Ming Qi's Ding capital. You are not some imperial physician and are clearly the great Liang's Minister of Defense. You are a liar. Chapter 925. Luotan angrily stood at the doorway. Her expression was somewhat haggard and there were traces of bruises under her eyes. At this moment when she looked at Gao Yang, it was clear that she needed an explanation from Gao Yang. Gao Yang wanted to return to refine medicine. His pharmacy was in his own residence and there were many medicinal herbs in the residence. The Gao residence and Prince Rui residence were not far from each other, thus he returned to the residence to refine medicine but did not expect to encounter Luo Tan's questioning upon his return. The maidservant beside Luo Tan looked at Gao Yang apologetically. On the morning of the royal hunt, she had originally followed Gao Yang's instructions to have Luo Tan stay away. Who knew that Luo Tan would sneak out on her own and coincidentally see Gao Yang walking among the officials? Luo Tan was usually muddle-headed on small matters but was very astute on big matters. She immediately turned back to ask the maid, and when the maid saw that she could not hide it anymore, she could only tell the whole story. For Luo Tan, this was somewhat unacceptable. Gao Yang was a pure doctor, so it did not matter if he was in the Great Liang or Ming Qi. But he was obviously the Minister of Defense of the Great Liang but was an imperial physician in Ming Qi. In Luo Tan's eyes, he was no different from an enemy country's spy. In addition, the Luo family was a military family, and when Luo Tan was young, she and Luo Qian would always go to the opera troupe to listen to plays. Most of those loyal and righteous people would die from the spies. Luo Tan originally had a good impression of Gao Yang. Even though there were some small flaws, he would take care of her daily. Now that the person who took care of her had become a bad person, Luo Tan's heart could not accept it. This was really like when it rains, it pours. At this moment Gao Yang was busy with Xie Jingxing's matter and coincidentally bumped into Luo Tan. If it was before, he would definitely explain to Luo Tan in a good manner, but now there was not enough time. She was alone in a foreign country and her husband's life was hanging by a thread. Perhaps it would be good to have a sister by her side. He then said to the servant beside him, "Tell her that I will enter the room first. No one is allowed to come in." He then walked towards the pharmacy. Luo Tan thought that Gao Yang would explain some difficulties, as she did not believe that Gao Yang would do such a despicable and shameless thing. She did not expect that Gao Yang not only did not explain but also directly ignored her and entered the room. She said, "Hey, what do you mean? Tell me first, what are you?" Young Lady Luo, the manservant beside Gao Yang, quickly stopped her and said, "Let me tell you. Actually, things are a bit tricky now. Young master went out today to treat someone. Something happened to the prince of Prince Rui's mansion, and he needs young master to treat him." Luo Tan was startled. "Prince Rui? Isn't that my brother-in-law? What happened?" The servant wiped his sweat. "It's a long story." At the other end, Shen Miao leaned over Xie Jingxing's bed and blinked her eyes before sitting up again. After a short nap, she felt much better. She turned to look at the man on the bed. His eyes were still closed, as if he was asleep. Seeing that he was fine, Shen Miao's heart was at ease. But her heart was always in a mess. Shen Miao felt that ever since she was reborn, she had been living a stable life. Because of the previous lifetime's road in front of her, she always grasped things that others could not grasp. There was no such thing when she was forced to a dead end. But right now, it was the first time in her life that she tasted the feeling of powerlessness. Even though it did not happen to her, it was more uncomfortable than if it happened to her. But firstly, she did not have medical skills, and secondly, she did not know how to detoxify and could only take out 3 yuan Gui yuan pills. Shen Miao was indeed not used to placing all her hopes on Gao Yang. She slowly reached out and held Xie Jingxing's hand that was exposed outside the blanket, as if this would make her feel at ease. Uncle Tang came over to send some hot tea and snacks to Shen Miao. Shen Miao did not rest well and did not eat well, so she looked haggard. Uncle Tang said, "Furin should also eat something. It is very tiring to keep taking care of master like this." Shen Miao gave her thanks and suddenly thought of something. She hesitated for a moment before asking, "Uncle Tang, when His Highness just arrived at Longyi 2 years ago, was it also like this?" 2 years ago, there was another reason why Xie Jingxing returned to Longyi. In the battlefield of the northern Jiang, there were Emperor Wen Hui's men in the Ming Qi's Xie family's army, and those people wanted to take his life. Xie Jingxing escaped life and death, but he did not escape serious injuries. From what one heard, it seemed to be a life and death situation. At that time it was fortunate that Gao Yang was by his side, and Xie Jingxing's own fortune was great, else one feared that there would not be the current Prince Rui. Uncle Tang was startled for a moment and looked at Xie Jingxing, who was on the bed. His eyes were filled with memories, so Furin also know about it. Indeed, when Master first returned to Longyi, he was also sent back. At that time the physician said that there was no way to save him, and Gentleman Gao was also helpless, but at the end Master managed to pull through. It was really a miracle. Chapter 926. So Furen also know. Indeed, when Master returned to Longyi for the first time, he was also sent back. At that time the physician said that it was impossible to save him, and Gentleman Gao was also helpless, but at the end Master was able to pull through. It was really a miracle. Shen Miao's eyes hung down. There are a lot of people who want his life in Longyi. Uncle Tang looked at Shen Miao with some surprise and hesitated for a moment before shaking his head and sighing. How is it that easy to defend the great Liang's rivers and mountains? If it is so, at that time. He suddenly stopped talking and said, in short, Furen must take care of your body. As he spoke, he wanted to instruct the kitchen to brew the medicine and was about to leave. Just as Uncle Tang was about to leave the door, Shen Miao called out to him and asked, Uncle Tang, the relationship between the late emperor and His Highness did not seem to be good. Do you know about this matter? Uncle Tang's footsteps staggered and paused before slowly speaking. To be dissatisfied with Furen, this servant was once an attendant of the late Empress' residence. It is just that if Furen wants to know about these matters, it is better to wait for His Highness to tell you personally. Forgive this old servant for not being able to tell. He bowed and turned to leave the room. Shen Miao pressed her forehead. The great Liang's imperial family's secrets were no less than Ming Qi's, so what secrets would Xia Jingxing have? What was the relationship between the late emperor and Emperor Yonglu? Xia Jingxing did not tell her about these matters, and she also did not know the depth of it, thus she could not act rashly. At this time, Shen Miao would rather be more impulsive and not be so cautious. Perhaps she would be able to find out the truth by accident. Just as she was thinking about it, she saw Guyu rushing in with wide eyes and a somewhat helpless look. Furen. Furen, Shen Miao frowned. The more it was at this time, the more one must not be rash and hasty, as panic would cause chaos. The residence of Prince Rui could not be taken advantage of at this time. She asked, what happened? Why are you so flustered? Before she finished speaking, a familiar voice was heard from outside. Biao youngest sister. Shen Miao was startled and saw a familiar figure suddenly appearing behind Guyu. If it was not Luo Tan, who else could it be? Luo Tan's expression was somewhat anxious. When she saw Shen Miao, she walked in quickly and looked at Xia Jingxing, who was still unconscious on the bed, and muttered, he really did not lie to me. Shen Miao stood up and asked, why are you here? She had always been tolerant towards Luo Tan, like an elder towards a junior. Now that she stood up with a cold face, Luo Tan was startled. She couldn't help but shrink her neck and whispered, it's a long story. After Luo Tan told Shen Miao about the ins and outs of how she came here, Shen Miao could not help but suck in a breath of cold air and disapprovingly said, simply nonsense. The distance between the Great Liang and Ming Qi was very far, and you are staying alone in someone else's residence. If anything happened, how would Jiu Jiu and Jiu Mu feel? So what if you give in to my parents? Luo Tan knew that she was in the wrong and whispered, I know I was wrong. I just wanted to follow you guys. Then she said in a lower voice, I didn't expect Gao Yang to be from Longye. He lied to me that he had traveled to Longye and happened to have a mansion here. Shen Miao looked at the submissive Luo Tan and did not know what to say. Since the matter had already happened, it would be useless to blame anyone. Moreover, up until now, everything could be said to be safe, and no trouble had occurred. Even though Gao Yang was not as simple as he looked on the surface, but since he followed Xia Jingxing, he would not do anything disrespectful to Luo Tan. Even though Shen Miao did not know why Gao Yang would be like this, but looking at Luo Tan's appearance, Gao Yang should have taken good care of her. Chapter 927. Luo Tan was afraid that Shen Miao would mention sending her back now and immediately diverted the topic. Gao Yang went to the pharmacy to refine the antidote for brother-in-law. I thought that he was speaking nonsense, but now seeing brother-in-law, one then know that it is true. She looked at Shen Miao, Biao youngest sister, is brother-in-law's injury really serious? Shen Miao did not want to hide from her and nodded her head. The peaceful Yuan gathering pill can at most ensure his health for 10 days. If after 10 days, Gao Yang is still unable to refine the antidote, then it would be dangerous. Luo Tan was horrified. Is there no other way? I am thinking. Shen Miao's eyes drooped down. The news had already reached His Majesty's ears and His Majesty is secretly recruiting doctors, but distant water cannot quench present thirst. Luo Tan was silent for a moment but reached out to hold Shen Miao's hands and said firmly, brother-in-law is so talented and will definitely be fine. Both of you will be long and I am still waiting for you to give birth to a little nephew for me. You do not need to worry, I will accompany you to guard. Luo Tan was after all a family member and in a foreign country, no matter if it was Gao Yang or Ji Yushu, there was still a layer of closeness. Even if Luo Tan did not do anything, she would at least make one's heart feel better. Xie Jingxing could not be separated from others and because one did not know if his injuries would relapse, he needed someone to take care of him, so Shen Miao personally took care of him. She sat by Xie Jingxing's bedside almost all day, feeding him water and when there was nothing to do, she would read a book at the side, which was the Great Liang's political and historical books. She must quickly understand the Great Liang country so that she could have countermeasures in the future. She really did not like to be in a passive situation. Luo Tan also accompanied by Shen Miao's side and other than returning to her room to sleep at night, she would also sit with Shen Miao in the room at other times. It was rare that she, with her restless temperament, could stay here for a long time. Even though most of the time she would be sitting in a daze. 3 days passed by quickly and in these 3 days, Xie Jingxing did not wake up at all. Other than Gao Yang who was in closed-door cultivation to refine medicine, Emperor Wen Hui also sent an old imperial physician with the highest medical skills in the palace to take care of Xie Jingxing. Because the old imperial physician was present, Xie Jingxing's pulse was considered stable. Everyone placed their hopes on Gao Yang, hoping that he would be able to produce the antidote within 10 days. Otherwise, no one would be able to help them even if they cried for help. Who knew that on the 4th day, Xie Jingxing suddenly felt unwell. First, his pulse became extremely chaotic and unstable, and his breathing became very rapid. His face was frighteningly pale, and he couldn't even drink water. The wound had also begun to fester, and it looked extremely dangerous. The old imperial physician came over to take a look and shook his head with a sigh, saying that the poison in Xie Jingxing's wound was initially suppressed by Gao Yang's acupuncture technique, but it was only for a moment and now the poison could no longer be suppressed and started to spread. If he did not have those 3 origin returning pills, Xie Jingxing would not be able to hold on right now. However, even if they managed to survive for now, even if they were lucky enough to survive for 10 days, it was still hard to say what would happen to Gao Yang. Xie Jingxing's sudden deterioration made everyone's heart uneasy, especially Shen Miao. Previously when Xie Jingxing was injured, he was still considered to be calm, which made her a little comforted, but now she was unable to deceive herself. The matter of Xie Jingxing possibly not waking up was clearly placed in front of her. Even though the old imperial physician's medical skills were brilliant, he was not as brilliant as Gao Yang. If even Gao Yang was helpless, naturally he would be even more helpless. After repeatedly shaking his head, he returned to the palace to report. Uncle Tang hesitated for a long time before asking Shen Miao, Furen, at Ji Furen's end, is it necessary to inform? When he said those words, Uncle Tang's tone was very difficult, as if it contained great grief. Chapter 928. After Xie Jingxing returned from the hunting grounds, Shen Miao kept it a secret from the Ji residents because she did not want Ji Furen to worry and also to avoid alerting the enemy. But now Uncle Tang's meaning was that if Xie Jingxing really could not make it, Ji Furen would definitely come and see him, no need. Shen Miao decisively interrupted his words, not for the time being. Uncle Tang was startled and Tai Yi was also somewhat surprised. Pei Lang, who had been silent all the while, said, no matter what, there are some things that should be considered. Consider what? Consider the aftermath? Even though Shen Miao knew that Pei Lang was right and in such a tense environment, grief was unavoidable, but the most important thing was the future. Now one had to plan for the future. Shen Miao's heart burst with an inexplicable fire for no reason. Thinking of the previous lifetime when Wan Yu was married, Pei Lang also said to her in such a light manner, "Her Princess Highness is already married. Your ladyship should think more about the future." She coldly swept a glance at Pei Lang, and that gaze made Pei Lang startled, and his heart could not help but slowly sink. Luo Tan had long been unable to sit still and returned to the Gao residence to look for Gao Yang. However, she was told that Gao Yang must not be disturbed when refining medicine and no one was allowed to enter. Luo Tan was angry. "This cannot be done, that cannot be done. Could it be that I want to see my brother-in-law get sick? It is fine if it is my brother-in-law, but my youngest Biao sister is pitiful. In just a few days, she has become a lot more haggard and lost a lot of weight. She had just gotten married and this kind of thing happened. If something really happened, my youngest Biao sister would definitely not be able to live." Luo Tan had seen many dramas and had seen quite a number of scenes of people dying for love. Even though Shen Miao was usually calm and collected, she was after all a young female of more than 10 years of age and had just gotten married. If something happened to her husband, how could Shen Miao bear it? It was not possible for a young female to be a widow. The surrounding servants of the Gao residence looked at each other in dismay and did not dare to speak. This young lady of the Luo family's background was not small and was the Di Biao sister of Rui Wang Fei. Her temperament was as impulsive as fire, and even their young master had to give in to Luo Tan, not to mention them, the servants. Now that Gao Yang was in the pharmacy and could not be disturbed while he was refining the medicine, they, the servants, were unlucky and had to bear the wrath of Miss Luo. What kind of famous doctor is he? The world's famous magical hand Loyal Heart can't even detoxify a poison. What if he can't detoxify the poison after 10 days? Luo Tan's eyes reddened and her voice choked. It was as if she felt ashamed to cry in front of so many people. She turned her head and ran back into the room. She slammed the door shut and fell on the bed, crying silently. The people of the Luo family all had the kindness to stand up for injustice and judge others by their own standards. Especially since Shen Miao was Luo Tan's relative, Luo Tan could not wait to be in her place. Seeing Shen Miao being upset and not being able to help, Luo Tan felt that she was really incompetent. He felt that he did not have the face to face Shen Miao and was unable to face himself, so he simply locked himself in the room for a whole day. He didn't even eat, as if doing so would make him feel better. Because no matter how sad he would not be as sad as Shen Miao. As a result, Luo Tan's actions scared everyone in the Gao residence. The servants in the Gao residence had been by Gao Yang's side since he was young. Gao Yang had always been gentle with women but had never brought a woman into his residence. Moreover, he liked to tease Luo Tan, which was completely different from his usual lenient behavior. There must be a demon in an abnormal situation. Gao Yang's mind was sharp, but the servants were not stupid. The reason why they indulged Luo Tan was because they saw Luo Tan as their future female master. This future female master's heart was not comfortable at the moment and refused to eat. If their young master came out a few days later and saw Luo Tan's appearance, he would definitely be distressed. If he was distressed, the ones who would suffer would be the servants. Chapter 929. The servants discussed and decided to find someone to go in and comfort young Lady Luo. After searching around, they finally unanimously pushed out a person, a young girl called Ben Yu. Ben Yu was the daughter of a poor family that Gao Yang had saved from the hands of a tyrant. If it was not for Gao Yang's rescue, Ben Yu would have entered a brothel to be a girl. After entering the Gao residence, she became a servant girl. When Ben Yu was young, she was abducted by human traffickers and traveled all over. Her knowledge was extraordinary and she had some cleverness of the marketplace. She had a silver tongue, and if there was anyone in the Gao residence that could not think things through, it was not wrong to find Ben Yu to take care of them. At this moment, Luo Tan was not happy, so everyone called Ben Yu over to let her quickly persuade Luo Tan so that Luo Tan could eat well. Luo Tan was sitting in the room, crying silently. She saw someone push open the door and come in. It was a little girl with 2 red ribbons tied around her head. She carried a food basket in her hand. She placed the basket on the table and opened it, taking out some dishes from inside. The dishes were fragrant, but how could Luo Tan eat right now, so she said, "You go out, I do not want to eat." Young lady must not implicate your own body. The world is big, but the body is the most important. If one does not eat, one would easily fall ill. If young lady falls ill, Rui Wang Fei would be very uncomfortable. Ben Yu said. Luo Tan shook her head, "I cannot eat." Young lady, there is no need to think things through. His Highness Qin Wang is a good person and the heavens help him. Even though it is dangerous this time, he will definitely be fine in the end. It is said that one would have good fortune after surviving a great disaster. Thinking about it, in the future, it would be a flood of good fortune. Ben Yu continued to do her best to comfort. Luo Tan smiled bitterly. Anyone can say beautiful words, but it is not something that can be said in a few words. If saying a few auspicious words would make a person better, then what is the use of doctors in the world? No matter how nice you say it now, it is useless. It is better to do something practical to let my younger brother-in-law get better earlier and Biao younger sister be at ease earlier. Ben Yu was surprised. Luo Tan looked careless every day, and one look and one could tell that she was easy to deceive. She did not think that she would have such insight. When people are sad, they do want someone to say a few words of comfort to them, but only they themselves know what it is for. These pleasant words did not deceive Luo Tan. Luo Tan sighed, and her gaze became even more worried. Ben Yu said, "Miss, it's better to have something to say than nothing. It's never wrong to hope that His Highness will get better." "What you said is correct," Luo Tan said, "it's just that the current situation is critical. If you want me to relax, I cannot do it. Don't try to persuade me. I can't listen to you right now. Even if I let myself listen, my heart," she pointed to her chest, "can't do it." Ben Yu thought for a moment. This was the first time he was at his wit's end. She racked her brains for a long time before she seemed to think of words that could comfort Luo Tan. She said, "Actually, His Highness the Prince might not be that anxious. It is not the 10th day yet." Previously this servant had a younger sister who had a younger brother at home. He was only 3 years old and contracted a terrible disease. Everyone said that he would not live past 3 days. At that time, young master had also seen and said that the little child would definitely die within 3 days. Who knew that this servant's younger sister was lucky and met an expert who said that he had a way to change the little child's life. The younger sister brought her younger brother to find that expert, and guess what happened after 3 days? This Ben Yu was probably a talent, to be able to speak in such a way that it was like a storyteller in a restaurant. Luo Tan could not help but be attracted by her words and continued to ask, "What is it?" Ben Yu clapped her hands, "That little child is alive. Not only is he alive and well, he is even healthier than before." Luo Tan was startled and asked, "Why is it like this?" Chapter 930. Ben Yu said, "Nubi also find it very strange. Even young master could not explain it." "Where is that pair of siblings now?" Luo Tan asked. Because there were too many curious people, Nubi's little sister felt annoyed. Coincidentally, it was the right time to leave the residence, so she brought her younger brother to move out of Longyi. As to where they went, no one knows. Ben Yu said, "Speaking of which, she even drew the place where that expert lived for this servant, and this servant returned it to young master. Young master brought people over to take a look, but discovered that there wasn't any house that little sister spoke of, and there was only an uninhabited wasteland. Thinking that that person probably moved away, or perhaps little sister remembered wrongly, he left. In the end, they were not able to see that expert. Luo Tan pondered for a moment and suddenly asked, "Do you still have a map of where that expert is?" "There is." Then you nodded, "Almost everyone in this residence has one." There were too many curious people at the start and everyone wanted to find that person to change their fate to see if they could exchange for a rich and noble future. But in the end, they all returned without success. Luo Tan asked, "Then bring it for me." "What do you want this for?" Then you suddenly thought of something and cried out, "You wouldn't want to find that expert, right?" The matter of the younger brother of Nubi's little sister has been many years and one does not even know if that person is still alive. Moreover, even Gongzi couldn't find him back then. She said, Nubi didn't want young miss to find that expert to think of a way. Then Yu's heart was full of regret. She mentioned this matter to Luo Tan to make Luo Tan feel better. Look, that little brother was predicted to not live past 3 days and was able to escape from death in the end, much less Prince Rui. Who knew that this Luo Tan did not follow the normal path and actually wanted to find that expert? If that expert was so easy to find, wouldn't everyone be able to find him? What was the need to be busy here? Gao Yang would also not personally go and refine medicine. Luo Tan shook her head, "You just need to take it for me to see. I do not have to find that expert. I just feel very uncomfortable sitting here and not doing anything. No matter if I search or not, at least I have done my best for brother-in-law and Biaomei. I am not a useless person and my heart will feel much better." Since he had already said it like this, then you had no reason to refuse. She went out very quickly and returned very quickly. She handed Luo Tan a map that was embroidered with a handkerchief and blushed, "This servant's drawing is not good and I don't know how to read. I can only do embroidery. I have embroidered a map according to little sister's drawing. Young lady can see if you can understand it." Ever since Luo Tan came to Longyi, she had been wandering outside every day. The more remote the place was, the more interested she was. She had just come to Longyi not long ago but she was very familiar with every road. She jumped up when she saw it and said, "Isn't this the south of Fengtu Manor outside the West City?" Then Yu was stunned, "Young miss also knows?" She continued, "This servant's little sister said that after passing the Phoenix Head Manor, if we keep heading south, we will be able to see the house at the bottom of the mountain. But when young master brought people over and there were some people who went over later, it was clear that to the south of Fengtu Manor was a broken wall. There was no bottom of the mountain and there were no houses." Luo Tan stared at the map and said, "Fengtu Manor is not far from here and one can reach it in a day." Then Yu said, "Young lady, you cannot, I will go and find Biaomei." Luo Tan said, "You stay here." Then Yu was somewhat worried that Luo Tan would really go and find that expert who she did not know was real or fake. But thinking about it, Luo Tan was not reliable but Rui Wang Fei was definitely reliable and would definitely not mess around with Luo Tan. Thinking that Luo Tan would feel better because of this, she was relieved. Chapter 931. In the residence of Prince Rui, Shen Miao looked at the unconscious Xie Jingxing and her brows tightly knitted together. Xie Jingxing's situation was getting worse and he could only hold on for 6 days. In these 6 days, other than praying that Gao Yang would be able to refine the antidote, was there any other way? Just as she was thinking about it, Luo Tan ran in from the outside and did not say anything when she came in. She only asked Shen Miao, "Youngest Biao's sister, is the compass that I gave you on your wedding day still there? If it is, can you lend it to me?" Shen Miao looked at her suspiciously, "What do you want that for?" Luo Tan avoided her gaze and said, "I suddenly remembered, so I asked you to borrow it to play with." What kind of time was this? Even if Luo Tan's heart was big, how would she still have the mood to play? Shen Miao said, "You do not need to lie to me. Say, what do you want it for?" Pausing, she then said, "If you do not tell me the truth, then you do not need to think about getting it." Luo Tan was angry and anxious as she was always afraid of Shen Miao in every big matter. Clenching her teeth, she hardened her heart and simply revealed everything that Ben Yu had said previously. After finishing speaking, Luo Tan looked at Shen Miao's expression and said, "I want to look for that expert. Since he can change the fate of this servant's younger brother, it is not possible that he cannot change brother-in-law's fate. There's no other way. It's better to find someone than to find nobody." Shen Miao thought for a while before shaking her head. Gao Yang had already been there once. Compared to you now, as a doctor, he would definitely want to understand what was going on. Since Gao Yang could find that place, how would you find it? Luo Tan said, "Biao younger sister, if it is really a fake thing, how would I dare to waste your time at this juncture? I had heard from my grandfather that when he was young, he had seen a kind of Chiman Dunjia. Nothing could be seen from the outside, but every blade of grass and tree had a hidden mystery. When people walked in, they would unconsciously be confused by the scene in front of them. They would think that they were walking in a straight line, but they didn't know that they were walking on a curved path. He went around in circles, but he couldn't get out. In the early years, there were people who thought that this was the art of ghosts." Shen Miao frowned. "Chimen Dunjia." Luo Tan nodded her head. "It's just that grandfather also said that he had seen it once when he was young. Later on, this craft gradually died out. Until now, I'm afraid that no one has seen it. I thought that since that expert had the ability to change people's fates, it wasn't impossible that he didn't know the Chiman Duanjia. There's also the Chiman Duanjia, which is specially designed for martial artists. The higher one's martial arts, the harder it is for them to get out. In the end, they'll be trapped alive in the formation. You want to say that the reason why they couldn't find the house that the siblings were talking about was because someone had set up a Chiman Duanjia?" Shen Miao shook her head. "As you said, it's only for martial artists. Other servants of the Gao residence have also been there, but they still couldn't find him." Seeing Shen Miao like this, Luo Tan was somewhat discouraged and said, "In the end, you just do not believe me and do not believe that anyone can save brother-in-law, right?" "I believe," Shen Miao said. Luo Tan stared blankly. Shen Miao asked her, "Then can the compass not be affected by other things and keep pointing towards the south? The Feng Tu manor that you mentioned is towards the south, one's eyes and other things could be affected by the Chiman Duanjia but the compass would not." "That is the work of the craftsman," Luo Tan said. "It is precisely this logic. This is something used by the army and the sea to point the way, but I just thought that it is the best to use it on the Chiman Duanjia technique." "But..." She looked at Shen Miao and asked in disbelief, "Biao youngest sister, are you really willing to believe me and let me look for that expert?" "I believe you and also believe in my own luck." Shen Miao said, "One cannot just sit and wait for death. It is better to walk on more roads than to guard one road. No matter what the result is, one must try it out, else one would not be reconciled." She said, "I will go with you." Luo Tan opened her mouth. "Go together? If there is really an expert alive, then there must be a reason for that expert to hide his whereabouts. How can you convince him alone? Since he is my husband and I am his wife, there is naturally no reason for me to rely on other people's hands for this matter." It was as if this was the first time Luo Tan knew Shen Miao. All along Shen Miao was rational, calm and able to analyze the pros and cons. She thought that she would never see Shen Miao gamble and believe in impossible things, but this time Shen Miao actually did it. Was it because of Prince Rui? Shen Miao stood up and in a moment, her expression had changed. It was so firm that it was as if this was her plan from the start. She said, "You go with me and bring the compass." She then called Mo Qing and Song Yang over and said, "Both of you follow me to the Feng Tu manor. Tai Yi, take good care of Xie Jing Xing and wait for my return. If there is any matter, Tai Yi, you make the decision and if His Majesty asks, I will bear the responsibility." Finishing, she took the outer garments and went out, "Prepare the carriage." There was no doubt in her words and there was a hint of majesty. Chapter 932. Tai Yi and the rest did not think that Shen Miao would actually think of such a thing at this juncture. Even though the Phoenix Head Manor was not far from Longyi, it would take 2 days to travel to and fro with the horses. If there were any unforeseen events along the way, the most important thing was that the legendary expert, other than hearing the Gao siblings' side of the story, no one had seen him before and did not know if it was true or false. Shen Miao going to look for an unknown person was too irrational and too naive. But Shen Miao seemed to have steeled her heart and instructed Uncle Tang on what to do these few days before bringing Luo Tan out. Before leaving, she instructed that the matter of her and Luo Tan going out must not be spread out. After disguising herself, she brought star anise, Mo Qing, Song Yang and Luo Tan along the way. Because she wore a bamboo hat and wore the clothes of an ordinary person, no one could recognize her. The residents of Prince Rui had always been good at doing these kinds of disguises. Even though Tai Yi was somewhat worried, when Shen Miao was strict, even Shen Qiu did not dare to easily stop her, much less these servants. Looking at Shen Miao's departing figure, Uncle Tang asked, "This. Can Furen find the person?" Tai Yi shook his head. It is better to have a heart test than to not have one. At least one is a righteous person. He then turned his head to instruct others, hide the matter of Furen leaving the residence well. If the news were to leak out, bear the consequences. In the carriage, Luo Tan looked at Shen Miao and said, "Biao youngest sister, why don't you sleep for a while? These few days you did not have a good rest and did not stop for the journey. It is better for you to take a rest first." Shen Miao's heart was somewhat in a mess. Now that the carriage was bumpy, even though she did not have the heart to rest, Luo Tan's words were very reasonable. If she did not rest well, it would not be good to delay the matters at hand. Thus she drowsily closed her eyes and dozed off. One did not know why, but this sleep was exceptionally long. Shen Miao originally set off in the afternoon, and when she woke up, she was shaken awake. She opened her eyes in a daze and saw Luo Tan looking at her. "Biao youngest sister, wake up. We have arrived." Shen Miao followed Luo Tan down the carriage, and at this time it was already the afternoon of the second day. The carriage stopped in the middle of a wasteland. Perhaps no one had taken care of the branches growing there, but the branches were intertwined and almost covered the sky. In June, there would still be sunlight even in the evening. However, this place seemed gloomy and dark. There wasn't even a trace of heat. It was quite frightening to look at. Mo Qing and Song Yang also frowned. Song Yang said, "What kind of damn place is this? There's not even a person. I heard that there used to be an embroidery shop here." The embroidery shop specialized in embroidery of a phoenix tail. However, the embroidery shop gradually declined and the shop was abandoned, explained Octagonal Anise immediately. He was an inquisitive person. Luo Tan looked up and down, left and right. She unfolded the handkerchief embroidered with the map and said, "But there should be a small path embroidered on this map. There are no roads here." Everyone came over to take a look. Sure enough, the map was clear. In front of the Phoenix Head Manor was a small path. If they walked along the path, they would reach the fields and houses. But there wasn't even a trace of a path here, let alone houses and fields. Why is there not even a single person? It is as if no one has been here for a long time. Luo Tan said, "Could it be that the grass has grown and covered the path so that we cannot see it?" Mo Qing and Song Yang looked around and shook their heads, not to the extent. Octagonal Anise and Fennel Xiang also looked around. Fennel Xiang said, "This forest is too big. After the sun sets, it would be easy to get lost in the forest and there might be other wild beasts. We are also not familiar with the roads here. Furen, you see." Chapter 933. As servants, the most important thing was to protect Shen Miao's safety, lest Shen Miao fall into danger before the fated expert was found. The people of the Mou army were good at dealing with enemies, but in this unfamiliar dark forest, they were not good at walking in the middle of the night. In fact, Fennel and the rest did not care much about the expert that Luo Tan mentioned. From their point of view, Luo Tan had a whimsical idea and was too naive, but Shin Miao was also as naive as Luo Tan, making everyone's heart somewhat subtle. Only Mo Qing did not doubt Shin Miao's orders. Fennel and the rest did not understand Shin Miao, as Mo Qing had followed Shin Miao from the very beginning. Initially in Ming Qi, Shin Miao's situation was even more precarious, but she was still able to walk out of such a difficult situation. Every decision that Shin Miao made would have a special effect in the future, and Mo Qing never doubted this point. Shin Miao looked at the map and asked Luo Tan, "Then you said that after the siblings entered the Phoenix Head Manor, they kept heading south, right?" Luo Tan said, "Yes. But she also said that there was a small path on the south side of the map and the small path just happened to head south, but there is no small path here." "Let's go," Shin Miao said. Everyone was surprised for a moment before Song Yang asked, "Furen, where are we going?" Shin Miao indicated Luo Tan to take out the compass and said, "Head south." "But there are no small paths here." Fennel was extremely surprised. If there is a wrong path, would it not be wrong from the start? Shin Miao glanced at the Fennel and said, "Since we are already here and cannot differentiate which one is right and which one is wrong, then let's try all of them. There are only these directions here, and since that pair of siblings said to head south, the direction would be the same. No matter where the small path is, at most search in the 4 directions of north, south, east and west. When there is no other way, trying is also a way." She took the compass and walked forward. Everyone was stunned for a moment before Luo Tan said, "Biao, youngest sister, you also wait for me." Octagon Anise smiled, "Let us quickly follow." The others followed behind him. The sun soon set. The forest was already dark because of the dense foliage. After the sun set, it became even darker. Fortunately, Song Yang had brought enough matches with him. After lighting them up, he moved forward. It was just that the tree branches were the same all the way here. In the end, it was impossible to tell the difference between the front and the back. They were almost all the same branches. And because it was too cold, it was so cold that it did not feel like it was the 6th month. Mo Qing and Song Yang were still alright, but the females were somewhat cold. Shin Miao and the rest had brought along their outer garments, and at this moment they could not help but hold their outer garments tighter. Indistinctly, there were sounds of wild beasts roaring in the forest. Mo Qing and Song Yang stopped at the same time and slowly placed their hands on the swords at their waists. Fennel lowered her voice and whispered, "It's the sound of a wolf. There are actually wolves here. Wolves are afraid of fire." Shin Miao said, "Everyone hold 2 matches in their hands and light them up. Wolves are a very cunning animal. If there is a pack of wolves in the forest and sees so much fire, they would think that there are many of us and dare not approach." Fennel was surprised for a moment and a surprised look appeared on his octagon round face. "Furen, you even know the method to deal with a pack of wolves." It was not strange for the Mou army's people or the pugilistic world's people to know these methods, but Shin Miao was the daughter of an official's family, so it was unusual for her to know these. Even if the Shin family was a military general, this method seemed to be too skillful, as if it was a veteran from a hunter's family. Chapter 934. Shin Miao smiled, heard it mentioned by others. In the beginning, when Wan Yu was going to marry the Xiongnu people, she heard that there would often be wolf packs at the Xiongnu side. Shin Miao was worried and found many ways to drive away the wolf packs for Wan Yu, thinking that Wan Yu would be able to use it in the future, but it was a pity. A flash of pain flashed past her eyes, and when Shin Miao looked up again, she was very calm. "Continue to move forward." "Still move forward?" Feng Xiang said, "Furen, we have already walked for several hours. Did you not discover? We seem to be going around in circles and did not move forward at all." Just now we have walked several times, and if this goes on, one fear that one would not be able to reach the end even if one were to walk here for an entire night. Song Yang also said, correct. Furen, even if one want to walk, one cannot keep walking without an objective. Otherwise we would be making mistakes again and again. Shen Miao pondered for a moment before looking at Luo Tan. Is the direction of the compass always towards the south? Luo Tan quickly nodded her head. Yes, we definitely did not walk in the wrong direction, but this scenery indeed seems to have been seen before. Obviously we did not walk in the wrong direction, but the scenery is exactly the same. This is even more strange. Shen Miao said, things that are extremely abnormal must be a demon. If we walk in the wrong direction, we would definitely fall into the trap and definitely not be able to return. It is better to keep walking like this. But what you all said is not wrong. One would always see the same scenery and these trees look exactly the same, so it would inevitably mislead one. If it is really the same, one would be disgusted and suspicious, but if it is fake, it would confuse one's senses. She took out a handkerchief from her sleeve and asked Luo Tan to take out a handkerchief as well. She tied the handkerchief around her eyes and said, let's do it this way, we won't be misled by our eyes and won't be able to see anything. We'll just follow the compass and see where we can go. Me and older Biao's sister will cover our eyes and Star Anise will look at the compass at the front. Song Yang and the rest of you will be at the back and try to walk forward. Mo Qing was somewhat hesitant. Furen, is this really possible? I know what you all want to say. Shen Miao covered her eyes, but her tone was unquestionable. Honestly speaking, I also do not know what the consequences of walking like this would be, but Xie Jingxing does not have that much time. If we take another step, there would be more possibilities. If he didn't even leave, then the result wouldn't be strange. Yes, yes, yes. Luo Tan also quickly said, no matter what, we have to give it a try first. What's the use of saying it 1,000 times? It's better to do it yourself. Fennel was somewhat surprised. She felt that she really could not understand this Furen. When she married into the residence of Prince Rui, the subordinates of the Mou army had secretly peeped and felt that this Furen had a calm and steady temperament, so she was not warm enough towards her mistress. It could be said that she was heartless, but she was willing to take the risk for her mistress to walk in the dark forest for an entire night. He looked like a smart person who rationally analyzed the pros and cons, but at this moment, he naively believed in the legend of fate changing, and even used such a stupid method. Fennel was unable to understand Shen Miao's contradictory actions, but in fact it was not as complicated as she had imagined. At a special juncture, one would unconsciously reveal one's sincerity, and in times of emergency, it was not reason and intelligence that commanded others, but instinct. At this moment, wisdom was no match for the urgency in his heart. Mo Qing silently followed behind Shen Miao. Fennel and the rest paused for a moment but did not say anything and continued to follow. The people in Longyi City did not know about the matters that happened in Fengtu Manor. All the officials only knew that Prince Rui was injured on the day of the hunt, but no one knew how serious his injuries were, and naturally no one dared to ask. It was just that Xia Yuan's position in the Longyi court was very subtle. Some people were looking forward to his death, and some people's lives were tied to him, and prayed that nothing would happen to him. Chapter 935. No matter how suspicious everyone was in their hearts, the residence of Prince Rui was like an impenetrable wall and did not reveal a single bit of information. They did not know what was going on, and no matter how itchy their hearts were, they could not find any clues. Thus, those who were restless continued to be restless and those who were gloating continued to gloat. No one was able to help anyone. In the Lu residence, Lu Wana was pacing back and forth in the room and acted coquettishly to Lu Furen, "Mother, I want to go and see His Highness the Prince. I do not know how his injuries are. What if his injuries are serious?" Lu Furen comforted her. How could it be so serious? If it was really serious, one would definitely look for a doctor. Now that there is no news from the prince's residence, it should be fine. What are you going over for? But my heart is very uneasy. Lu Wanner said, it is all that Shen Miao's fault. She is simply a jinx. She had just married and His Highness the Prince met with such a big incident. She is really a jinx to her husband. It is better to divorce her as soon as possible. If he continues to be entangled with her, who knows what will happen to His Highness the Prince. Lu Furen smiled, yes, yes, yes. But you cannot go over now. When Prince Rui's body is better, let your eldest sister think of a way to let you meet. Now you cannot cause trouble. Lu Wanner said unhappily, mother must not lie to me. After Lu Wanner left, the smile on Lu Furen's face sank and she instructed the maid at the side, take good care of young lady. Do not let her go out these few days. If master's matters are spoiled, I will hold you all responsible. Speaking till the end, her tone was sinister and her face was sinister, exactly the same as that ruthless and cruel General Lu Zhengchun. The maids all lowered their heads and complied. On the other side, in the Prime Minister residence, Madame Yi and Master Yi were also talking about this matter. Madame Yi was playing chess with Master Yi. Yi Maokai and Lu Zhengchun were completely different. Lu Zhengchun was a typical martial artist and one look and one could tell that he was someone who had rolled on the battlefield. His eyes were filled with killing intent and his fiendish appearance could even scare a child to tears. Yi Maochun, on the other hand, was born with a fair complexion and no facial hair, he looked very amiable. If one did not know him, one would think that he was a scholarly scholar from some family. However, this prime minister was able to make the officials of Longyan not dare to act rashly against the Yi clan when he had few children. Emperor Yongla also could not openly fall out with him. He was definitely not as harmless as he looked. Madame Yi placed a chess piece down and said with a smile, this Prince Rui's residence is like an iron bucket. There is no news coming from it at the moment. I wonder how Prince Rui is doing now. I can't eat well, and I can't sleep well either. I'm really troubled. Doesn't Madame already have a plan in mind? Why are you still troubled over this? Yi Maochun smiled and put down a chess piece. Madame Yi looked at him reproachfully. She wasn't a pampered girl in her late 20s. When she acted like a spoiled child, it was a little inappropriate. However, Madame Yi didn't realize it herself. She continued to move her chess piece and said, no news means bad news. A person like Prince Rui who tried to be brave, as long as he could see someone, he would definitely come out. The reason why he hasn't shown himself is probably because he can't. Yi Maochun laughed, maybe he's trying to confuse others. Master, you're looking down on me and trying to coax me. Madame Yi said, it's definitely not a lie. Oh. Why is that so? Madame Yi looked at the chessboard and said, I'm not sure about the situation at Prince Rui's residence, but His Majesty didn't hide it at all. Isn't he starting to deal with the Lu clan now? Seeing how His Majesty dealt such a heavy blow, Prince Rui's injuries aren't light. Yi Maochun laughed heartily, Madam, it turns out that you're able to see through the affairs of the imperial court. I feel guilty. Why don't Madam make a guess and see what I'm planning? Chapter 936. Madame Yi lowered her head and smiled. That's hard to say. We have to see what happens to Prince Rui. Seeing that Yi Maochun did not deny it, Madame Yi felt that she was right. She continued, His Majesty and the Lu family have been fighting in the dark for so many years. Recently, he has been trying to rope us in. However, we are not stupid. How can we be used by others? When the sandpiper and the clam fight, the fisherman benefits. Let His Majesty and the Lu family fight. Previously, when Prince Rui was still around, we were biased towards His Majesty and were happy to be on good terms with him. However, if Prince Rui fails to escape this time, with just His Majesty, the world will still be controlled by the Lu family. It's just Prince Rui. How can he be as magical as you say? Yi Mao-chun smiled faintly. Prince Rui is a formidable person. Madame Yi smiled as well. Doesn't Master think so too? Yi Mao-chun paused and looked at Madame Yi meaningfully. Madame Yi seems to be able to read my mind. However, do you think that Prince Rui will be able to escape this time? Madame Yi thought for a long time before saying, he won't be able to escape. Yi Mao-chun looked at her. Master, do you still remember that when Prince Rui returned to Longyi 2 years ago, he was seriously injured? His Majesty could hide it from others, but he could not hide it from us. At that time, we thought that Prince Rui would not be able to turn the situation around. We don't know where he got such good luck and came back to life. Later on, he single-handedly messed up the situation in the imperial court. Madame Yi smiled. However, it is impossible for a person to be lucky twice. The last time, God protected him. This time, who will protect him? A person's fate is probably predetermined from the beginning. Prince Rui is destined to have no future. He managed to escape 2 years ago, but he will not be able to escape 2 years later. Is that so? Yi Mao-chun placed a chess piece after Madame Yi and said, I'm thinking the exact opposite of what you think. 2 years ago, Prince Rui's medicine was ineffective, but he survived. A person's fate is probably predetermined from the beginning. Prince Rui is destined to have a bright future. Since he managed to escape 2 years ago, he will naturally be able to escape 2 years later. Madame Yi did not get angry or refute Yi Mao-chun. She only said, let's wait and see. Yi Mao-chun also smiled. He placed the last piece and said, Madame seems to have lost. Madame Yi took a look and confirmed that it was true. She half coquettishly said, Master, it's not nice to play chess while I am talking. Let's play another round. Yi Mao-chun shook his head with a smile and said, maybe another day. We're going to test Hong Guang's homework today. It's almost time. Madame Yi hurriedly said, then you should leave first, Master. Hong Guang's homework is more important. Yi Mao-chun stood up and left. Madame Yi looked at old Master Ye's departing figure and her expression gradually turned cold. She appeared extremely ugly and said sharply, he's just a cripple. So what if he's knowledgeable? In the end, he can only stay in the residence for the rest of his life. In the end, he felt it was difficult to quell his anger. He swept the chess pieces on the table to the ground and said in a low voice, exactly the same as that vixen. The servant girls in the room did not dare to move. Everyone knew that Madame Yi disliked young Master Yi the most. Yi Hongguang was the son of that concubine and was raised under Madame Ye's name. He was the son of the first wife and the only heir of the Yi family. The morning sun shone on the ground through the gaps between the tree branches. It looked like specks of silver and was very beautiful. In the pitch-black night, the silvery sunlight finally drove away the haze. Although it was only a little, it was enough to make people feel gratified. Fennel and Star Anise stopped in their tracks and turned around to support Shin Miao and Luo Tan, whose eyes were still bandaged. They said to Shin Miao, Madam, the sky is already bright. Chapter 937. If they did not see it with their own eyes, Fenxiang and the rest would not have thought that Shin Miao, a young lady of a noble family, would actually walk with them in the dark for an entire night in this uninhabited forest. Fenxiang and the rest had gone through special training and naturally did not feel it, but Luo Tan, who had a foundation in martial arts, was already very haggard and sleepiness was written on her face, but Shin Miao still had a clear and awake look. Fenxiang and Song Yang were muttering in their hearts, could it be that this Furen was actually a martial artist? That was why she had such a strong willpower. In fact, they were thinking too much. It was just that when Shin Miao was in the cold palace, Mei Furen and the other concubines would sometimes make things difficult for her, and the palace was not lacking in the matter of throwing stones at someone when they were down. Moreover, the situation was urgent and she only wanted to get out of the forest, so how would she have the mood to be sleepy? How far have we walked? Shen Miao asked. Replying to Furen. Song Yang said, after walking for an entire night, one have walked very far, but according to the marks left along the way, one did not see a second time, so one should not have returned. She then said, the blindfold method is indeed effective. It seems that we were deceived by our own eyes previously. But this forest still looks exactly the same. Luo Tan said weakly. Continue walking. Shen Miao said, after walking so far, one would be able to walk to the end. Fenxiang was startled for a moment but did not say anything this time. Last night, they had tried to stop Shen Miao a few times, but not only did Shen Miao not listen to them, most likely she was annoyed by their words and even reprimanded them a few times. It was the subordinates of the Mou army who were used to being arrogant and despotic were actually scolded by Shen Miao like a cat that had seen a mouse. Fenxiang and Song Yang were also puzzled in their hearts. This Furen looked gentle and steady and easy to talk to, but once she got angry, why was she so scary? Even that Empress Xianda in the palace would not have such a terrifying and imposing manner. The few of them continued to walk behind Shen Miao. Luo Tan was somewhat dispirited. Even if she practiced martial arts, she could not be compared to Shen Miao and the rest. She was also not as bitter as Shen Miao, thus she could only forcefully hold on and widen her eyes, trying to find something to distract her attention. With such a distraction, one could sense that something was not right and pulled Shen Miao. Hey! There are flowers here. I didn't see any flowers along the way. Everyone was taken aback. They all came over to take a look. Sure enough, there were small flowers hidden in the bushes. If they didn't pay attention, they wouldn't have been able to see them. Mo Qing suddenly frowned. There seems to be the sound of a chicken crowing. Fennel Star Anise and Song Yang's martial arts were high, they pricked up their ears and listened carefully. Finally they said, not bad. Why is there a rooster crowing here? Shen Miao muttered, could it be that there is a house in front? She said, don't look anymore. Let's go. Since there are sounds, the exit shouldn't be far away. We'll be able to walk out of this forest soon. When everyone heard that they could walk out of this forest, their fighting spirit soared and they immediately regrouped and set out. This time, his luck was pretty good. After walking for the time it took for half an incense stick to burn, he felt that the gaps between the branches were getting bigger and bigger. Previously, the forest was dense, but now it was much more sparse. The more sunlight shone in, the more comfortable they felt. Looks like we really have to go out. Luo Tan was so excited that her sleepiness was swept away. Let's go quickly. Before she finished speaking, she saw that the forest had reached the end, but there was a small path. Everyone looked at each other and Shen Miao took the lead to walk in. Walking along the small path until the end, he suddenly saw a field. Although this field was a field, it was also planted with flowers and vegetables, but it looked very messy. It was as if someone had planted it but didn't take care of it properly, allowing it to grow naturally. As a result, it grew into a mess. Even so, there was still a house at the back. The house was made of thatch and was on the verge of collapsing, as if the roof would be blown away by the wind in the next moment. Everyone walked forward and Octagon Anise ran in first before shaking his head and came out. Furen, there is no one inside. No one. A trace of disappointment flashed in Luo Tan's eyes. How can there be no one? This place was very different from what they imagined. They imagined that it would be the residence of a peerless expert, but it was so dilapidated and there was no one at the moment, which made them feel even more discouraged. Shen Miao said, the flowers and plants are still here and it does not seem like there is no one. Wait here, one will appear. Before she finished speaking, a hoarse voice was heard, oh, there is a distinguished guest. Apologies for not going out to meet you. Everyone turned their heads and Shen Miao could not help but be startled when she saw that person's face. She cried out involuntarily, it's you. Octagon Anise asked, Furen. Do you know him? That smiling middle-aged man who was wearing a tattered Taoist robe was the strange Taoist priest who received Shen Miao's golden peanut in Ming Chi Pu Tua Temple. He was the one who calculated that her phoenix fate is good but imprisoned for a lifetime, calculated that her past life is like a dream, one must avoid entanglement, calculated that her extreme prosperity, purple air comes from the east. Chapter 938. Shen Miao did not think that the so-called expert was the strange Taoist priest that she had met once in Ming Chi's Pu Tua monastery. That day the strange Taoist priest's words made Shen Miao brooded for a long time, as she felt that this person seemed to have seen through the secret of her 2 lifetimes. But afterwards when she sent people to search for that Taoist priest's whereabouts, they searched the entire Ding capital and did not find any trace of that person. Now thinking about it, it was no wonder that she could not find anything. This Taoist priest actually came all the way to the great Liang's Long Yi. Thus the matter was somewhat strange. According to what Ben Yu said, that pair of siblings had met this Taoist priest a few years ago. A few years ago the Taoist priest was actually in Long Yi, and it seemed that this Taoist priest had stayed in Long Yi for quite a long time. Could it be that this Taoist priest was from the Great Liang? Then why would he appear in Ming Chi's Ding capital? It was not possible that he came all the way back just to calculate those 2 divination sticks for her, right? Shen Miao said, Taoist priest. The strange Taoist priest looked at her and stroked his beard before shaking his head. This Taoist priest's name is Qi Yan. Furen is here to save someone. This Taoist priest has been waiting for you for a long time. Luo Tan was startled for a moment before asking, Taoist priest Qi Yan, you already knew that we would come back to look for you? Taoist priest Qi Yan smiled proudly and shook the divination pot at his waist. The pot made a crackling sound as he said, this Taoist priest also did a divination for himself. Shen Miao thought that this Taoist priest was weird but seemed to have some real ability. For example, the words that he said in Pu Tua Monastery were very reasonable. If he was that so-called expert, it would not be surprising. She said, my husband is seriously injured, and upon hearing that Taoist priest can go against the heavens and change one's fate, I specially came over to ask Taoist priest to save my husband's life. After the matter is done, there will be a reward. Fenxiang and the rest were standing behind Shen Miao. When they heard Shen Miao's words, it seemed that she knew this strange Taoist priest. Even though they were bewildered in their hearts, it was not a good time to ask. Now that he heard Shen Miao's words, he started to suspect if she was possessed. The matter of defying the heavens and changing fate was too mysterious. No matter how he looked at it, this priest was just an ordinary person who grew up eating grains. Could it be that Shen Miao had been deceived by a swindler? Shen Miao however knew that for a person who was able to see that she had lived 2 lifetimes and was able to see that she was an empress in her previous life, this strange Taoist priest was not someone who spoke nonsense and guessed. Hearing Shen Miao's words, strange Taoist priest smiled and shook his head. As he got closer, everyone could see clearly that he was carrying a premonition on his back and holding a fish basket in his hand. It seemed like he had gone fishing. However, there was a line on the fishing rod, and the hook connected to it was straight. It would be strange if he could catch a fish like that. Sure enough, the fish basket was also empty. How pitiful. Seeing that he was not replying to Shen Miao, Luo Tan became anxious and asked, Taoist priest, can you save my brother-in-law? The Taoist priest placed the fish against the door and then straightened his back. He looked deeply at Shen Miao and said, Heaven's secrets cannot be divulged. I cannot even divulge heaven's secrets to madam, how would I dare to go against the heavens and change my fate? But you have saved Ben Yu's friend, that little brother. Luo Tan was puzzled, isn't that considered going against the heavens and changing one's fate? That is because my son is not fated to die. He was fated to meet me and I was fated to save his life. Qi Yan Taoist priest said. Fenxiang, Ba Anise and the rest were stunned. They thought that it was just the siblings talking nonsense and did not expect it to be true. Moreover, the Taoist priest in front of them also admitted that he was the one who did it. Shen Miao frowned slightly. Then dare I ask Taoist priest, what is our fate? The Taoist priest smiled. Heaven's secrets cannot be divulged. Chapter 939. To the left, heaven's secrets must not be revealed, to the right, heaven's secrets must not be revealed, and at such a critical juncture, even if Shen Miao was able to endure it, her anger rose to her head and she said angrily, what a person outside the secular world does is not something that is completely devoid of conscience. Now that good people are harmed by scoundrels, the bad people are instead proud of themselves. It is really that killing and arson is a golden belt, repairing bridges and mending roads without a corpse. What kind of heaven's way is this? What kind of righteousness is this? Taoist priests still carried out such a practice. This is really an eye-opener for me and I also find it extremely ridiculous. Song Yang's eyes widened. Why was Shen Miao scolding people now? These words could not be said to be incisive, but for Shen Miao to say it in one breath, it made one's heart feel refreshed. Contrary to everyone's expectation, Taoist priest Scarlet Flame did not get angry after being scolded. Instead, he laughed heartily and said, it's true that you have been with that dragon for a long time, you have also become so fierce. Very good. Luo Tan muttered softly, are you sick? Being scolded and still so happy, Taoist priest Qi Yan opened his mouth, you are right. Heaven's way is originally unfair, but the people of the world care about the matters of the world. Heaven's way dominates the way of fate but cannot dominate the way of fate. He smiled gently, his horsetail whisk, even though he was dressed in rags, at this moment there was a trace of celestial air about him. He said, even though heaven's way did not preordain me to change his fate and his fate is too precious and I am unable to change it, but heaven's way preordained us to meet here and also preordained this poor Taoist to bestow you with fate. He spoke in a muddled manner and everyone was puzzled. Only Shen Miao looked at him sharply. She heard that Taoist priest said, you really want to save him? Correct. The Taoist priest laughed again, since you want to save him, then follow me. Finishing, he turned around and made a move to walk forward. Shen Miao did not hesitate and immediately followed. Fennel and the rest also quickly set off. Taoist priest Qi Yan suddenly turned back and looked at Fennel and the rest, you all cannot follow. Why? Song Yang's face was filled with anger. They were ordered to protect Shen Miao's safety, so how could they let Shen Miao follow a strange Taoist priest alone? If something happened to her, how would they explain it to Xie Jingxing when he woke up? In front of us is the Qi Men Dun Jia set up by my master. No one in the world can solve the Qi Men Dun Jia set up by my master, including me. There was only one life gate on this journey, and the others were all death gates. This was meant for those who were skilled in martial arts. The higher one's martial arts, the faster one would die. This madam doesn't know any martial arts, so she can travel with me. As for the rest. He shook his head, enter and die. But why should we believe that you won't harm madam? Fennel said, if you don't let us follow, how do we know where you will take madam? Taoist priest Scarlet Flame spread his hands like a scoundrel. If you don't believe me, I won't go. Take this lady back quickly. Feng Hua almost vomited blood. Shen Miao said, all of you just wait here for me. I will go over with the priest. Furin. Octagon Anise also disagreed. That. Luo Tan carefully opened her mouth, I say, can I go or not? Even though I have martial arts, it is not high, so it should not affect me. Taoist priest Scarlet Flame seemed to have noticed Luo Tan and sized her up from head to toe, still all right. More or less no martial arts. All right, you also come with me. Luo Tan. What did he mean by more or less no martial arts? Her martial arts were just a little worse and could not be compared to those in Prince Rui's residence who trained since young, but it was not that she did not have any good martial arts. Chapter 940. However, compared to Feng Hua and the others, at least she could go with Shen Miao. Luo Tan said, "Little cousin, I will accompany you. If anything happens, I can take care of you." Shen Miao thought for a while and nodded. Although Luo Tan was impulsive, she had not caused any trouble. Shen Miao did not know what Taoist priest Qi Yan wanted to do. She had always been on guard against people. Although she believed that Taoist priest Qi Yan had some ability, she was still suspicious of him. Feng Hua and the others saw that Shen Miao had made up her mind and knew that it was impossible to persuade her. Seeing that Luo Tan also followed them, they were slightly relieved. They gave Luo Tan some instructions and even gave her the signal fireworks that the Mo Yu army used to send messages. They said that if anything happened, she should crush the fireworks and they would naturally think of a way to rush over. Taoist priest Qi Yan was somewhat impatient and said, "Why are you still not leaving? When it gets dark, this poor Taoist will not be able to help you." Shen Miao said, "Let's go now." The path that Taoist priest Qi Yan took with Shen Miao and Luo Tan was very strange. Or it could be said that this place was like a forest and originally there was no road. However, Taoist priest Qi Yan took a very sharp turn and fell at a certain time. It was as if there was a clear road in a place that they could not see. The road that he took was not easy to walk on. Sometimes it seemed that there was no way out but he could dig out a new road. Luo Tan was amazed and Shen Miao was also somewhat surprised. Luo Tan asked, "Taoist priest, you seem to be very familiar with this place. Do you come here often?" "This poor Taoist has lived here since young and is naturally familiar with it." Taoist priest Qi Yan proudly stroked his beard and said, "Many of these trees were planted by this poor Taoist." Luo Tan nodded, "It seems that you are a native of Daliang." "How come I heard that? You have met little cousin before." "Little cousin has never been to Longyi before." "Could it be that you met in Longyi?" Luo Tan was still thinking about Shen Miao's surprised look when she saw Taoist priest Qi Yan. It was obvious that they knew each other before. Taoist priest Qi Yan gave Shen Miao a meaningful look. "This poor Taoist and this madam are fated to meet each other. No matter where we are, we will definitely meet." Luo Tan scratched her head. She didn't understand. Shen Miao, on the other hand, seemed to be deep in thought. She always felt that this Taoist seemed to know more than she thought. After this incident with Xie Jingxing was over, could he seriously ask her about his previous life? Just as this thought appeared in her mind, Taoist priest Qi Yan said with a smile, "Madam, you want to save someone, but you also want to ask questions. You can only choose one of the two, you can't have both. Where there are gains, there are losses, and where there are losses, there are gains. Madam, you must think carefully about your choice." Shen Miao's heart quivered. The Taoist priest seemed to be able to see through her thoughts. This meant that if they wanted to ask about the past life, they couldn't save Xie Jingxing. If they wanted to save Xie Jingxing, they had to keep silent about the past life. What kind of rule was this? Shen Miao was somewhat depressed. She heard Taoist priest Qi Yan ask, "Has madam made a decision in your heart?" Luo Tan looked at the two of them curiously. She didn't understand what Taoist priest Qi Yan and Shen Miao were talking about. However, Shen Miao had always been like this. Very few people could understand what she said. Her brain was not good, so it was even more impossible for her to understand. Shen Miao lightly said, "I can think of a way to find the answer myself. But when it comes to saving someone, I don't have any medical skills nor do I know how to change fate. I can only trouble Taoist priest. How can a secret be compared to a life? Taoist priest, please save the person first." Strange Taoist priest laughed again. "Madam is not honest. Instead of a secret and a life, it is better to say that you regard him as more important than yourself. So for him, you gave up the things that you are pursuing. He mysteriously smiled. Madame's hostility has also dissipated a lot because of this. Chapter 941. Shen Miao frowned slightly. That Taoist priest casually picked up a willow branch, and like a child, he hummed an unknown tune as he continued to walk forward while swaying back and forth. She had no choice but to follow. The priest walked for a long time and was afraid of delaying matters. Luo Tan did not dare to complain and Shen Miao did not say anything either. They did not know what time it was and only felt that the sky was getting darker and the sun was getting weaker. The priest suddenly stopped and said, "We have arrived." Luo Tan and Shen Miao both took 2 steps forward and saw that in front of them was a huge mountain valley. This valley was filled with fragrant flowers and it was already the height of summer in June and the flowers and plants were in full bloom. In addition to the golden rays of the setting sun, the 5-colored flowing lights made it seem as if they had arrived at a paradise on earth and one would feel that it was unreal. "This place is so beautiful," Luo Tan exclaimed. Priest Qi Yan looked at Shen Miao. Did Furen discover anything? Shen Miao only felt that there was a faintly discernible medicinal fragrance in the air and looked at the flowers and plants everywhere. Even though they were bright, they did not seem to be the same as ordinary flowers and plants. She hesitated for a moment before saying, "Are they medicinal herbs?" Taoist priest Scarlet Flame laughed. "Exactly. Although I can't save your husband and can't change his fate, my master has a medicinal valley with a stock of herb that can cure 100 poisons. This stock of herb can save your husband's life." Shen Miao did not tell Taoist priest Qi Yan about Xie Jingxing's injuries, but Taoist priest Qi Yan was able to tell that Xie Jingxing was poisoned. Luo Tan looked at the strange Taoist in admiration, but Shen Miao did not think much of it as she had already expected that this strange Taoist had some skills. It was not strange at all. She said, "I beg Daozhang to give me the medicine that can cure 100 poisons and save my husband's life." Qi Yan smiled. "This herb was left by my great-great-great-great master. It has been placed in this medicine valley. Until now, there is only one in the world. If an ordinary person were to eat it, their lifespan would be prolonged. If a poisoned person were to eat it, their illness would naturally be cured. This stock of medicinal herb is so precious, how can I give it to you for free? You are a compassionate Taoist priest." Luo Tan said, "If it is gold and silver, my youngest Biao sister can afford it. What do you want to exchange?" Shen Miao also said, "As long as it is within my ability, I will definitely do it for priest." "What if I want Furen's life in exchange?" Qi Yan said slyly. Shen Miao was startled and before she could speak, Luo Tan said, "You are such a bully. How can there be such conditions?" Qi Yan waved his hand and said, "Monks are merciful. I am a Taoist priest, so naturally, I will not do this kind of murder and arson. It's just a joke. I have a question that I need to ask Furen." He looked at Shen Miao who was momentarily stunned. "Can Furen dispel my doubts?" Miao, Shen, Fu, priest, Shen, Shen's is, Taoist deist Fu Shen Shen tu, she, how to, it, he, how, he. But how to? If one invested too much emotion, one would be hurt deeper in the future. Everything in her past life was a living example. She could try to love again but she did not dare to have a strong love and could not afford to gamble. Youngest Biao sister. Luo Tan shook her arm. Shen Miao settled her mind and looked at the Taoist priest. "Taoist priest, please speak." "Look." The Taoist priest crouched down and pointed to a small flower in the grass. "This is red sleeve grass. It is an elixir that can treat coughs. But these days it does not bloom much. Furen, what is the reason?" Chapter 942. What did this mean? Shen Miao was not a doctor and did not even know how to distinguish the medicinal herbs, so how could she see these problems? But she still squatted down and took a closer look. She saw that the flower bud was densely packed with black spots. Her heart moved and said, most likely there are insects. This priest also thinks so. Qi Yan had a distressed face, but this red sleeve grass is the most delicate and one cannot use medicine to expel insects, but it attracts insects the most. To get rid of these insects, one can only use one's hands to pull it out bit by bit and one's actions must be gentle, otherwise the petals will be damaged. Luo Tan said, so it is like this, but what does this have to do with us? Priest Qi Yan stood up and saw Shen Miao also standing up before smiling, but this priest is a male and one's actions are rough and usually not very careful. One fear that one would not be able to pick clearly and one would damage the petals if one is not careful. These are all rare elixirs and are very precious, so one would like to ask Furen to help me pick out the insects on them. Luo Tan's eyes widened. This priest let Shen Miao come over because he treated Shen Miao as a flower farmer. Shen Miao asked, after picking out all these insects, will this priest give me the herb that can cure hundreds of poisons? Qi Yan nodded his head. All right, I will do it. Shen Miao intended to immediately immerse herself in the task. Luo Tan did not speak anymore. It was not a loss to be a flower farmer for a while and earn a medicinal herb. But Qi Yan shook his head and led Shen Miao and Luo Tan a few steps forward. It is the red sleeve grass here. When the two of them saw it, they were somewhat stunned. It was a large field of medicinal herbs and it was almost as much as the farmland of a large family added together. Moreover, the medicinal herbs in the entire field were not neatly grown. Some red sleeve grass and some other grasses grew together and were incomparably dense. It would take a lot of effort to find those red sleeve grass, not to mention there were so many red sleeve grass. To pick out all the insects, one did not know how long it would take. Are you deliberately playing with us? Luo Tan suddenly jumped up and said angrily, these things, how can one person pick out all of them? Qi Yan just looked at Shen Miao with a smile, for and also think that one person cannot pick out all of them and one cannot do it alone? Shen Miao only looked at him deeply and said, after finishing all these, will Taoist priest really give me the herbs? Cousin. Luo Tan panicked. He's obviously playing tricks on you. If he really wanted to save them, why would he suggest such an impossible task? How does he look like a compassionate person? Qi Yan said, little girl, you're wrong. There was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. In this world, there were gains and losses, and there were gains and losses. If you wanted something, you had to pay the corresponding price. If this madam wants my medicinal herbs, then she has to help me get rid of the insects on the other herbs. This is a very fair thing. Moreover, isn't it up to this madam to decide whether I can complete the task or not? He said, pick out the insects on the flower buds of the red sleeve grass, then fertilize the herbs on the mountain, and I will return the herbs to you. He raised his horsetail whisk again and said, you can't fool around. I will check the herbs at the end. If you are even half-hearted, then I won't give you the herbs. Also, he looked at Luo Tan again, this young lady cannot come and help. Furen, can you do it? I can do it and hope that Taoist priest will keep his promise. After saying this, Shen Miao jumped into the herb thicket, bent down, and began to seriously pick up the insects. A dignified Qin Wang Fei, who was a pampered and spoiled official's daughter, was actually a flower girl and an herb farmer for a mountain villager. Even those herb farmers would not do so much work, pick the insects and fertilize. Luo Tan really could not imagine Shen Miao's frail body carrying the fertilizer. She only felt that if Shen Xian and Shen Qiu in the Ding capital knew about it, they would definitely be furious. Chapter 943. But when would Shen Miao go back on her decision? Luo Tan clenched her teeth and wanted to go over to help but was stopped by Shen Miao, stop. If you do not wish for me to hate you, then do not come down. She spoke harshly, but Luo Tan's eyes were red and her heart was flustered. If she knew that Shen Miao would be led by the nose, she would not have told Shen Miao about running to the moon. Now it was a sin to implicate Shen Miao to suffer and be cheated by others. She shouted, but this strange Taoist priest is clearly playing with you. Is it worth it? I did not do anything for him. Shen Miao did not even lift her head as she seriously took care of the flowers and plants. If there is a glimmer of possibility, then do it. She then said, if you are really thinking for me, then help me find one or make a lantern yourself. Later when the sky turns dark and one cannot see it, I will have a light. Luo Tan took a deep breath and in a blink of an eye, she saw Taoist priest Qi Yan smiling as he walked towards the other side with his horsetail whisk. She quickly followed and said, strange Taoist priest, listen to me first. Shen Miao was squatting in the flowering shrubs. She had not done such things for a long time and was not used to it. She did not feel that there was anything unbearable about picking insects and fertilizing for others. In this world, self-esteem and whatnot were not used at such times. When one should bend down, one should bend down. When one could not use schemes, one should obediently do manual labor and not do futile things. In her previous life, she had spent her entire life in the cold palace to finally understand this principle. If she had given up fighting with Mei Furen earlier and lowered her head, perhaps Mei Furen would not be so against Fu Ming and Wan Yu. Why would she let herself suffer a loss just because she wanted to be strong? Revenge? Unwillingness? These could be thought about later as the present was the most important. If Qi Yan was able to keep his promise, then it was worth it for her to suffer. To do some manual labor like a village woman in this wilderness was much more honorable than sitting on the Empress's throne in her previous life and being ridiculed by everyone. It was just that one did not know how long it would take to gather the red sleeve grass in this valley and there was no time to waste if one lied to her. Shen Miao could not help but smile bitterly. When Luo Tan brought the lantern over, the sky was already dark. In the valley at night, there was a cool breeze, bright stars, the moon and the chirping of cicadas, but Shen Miao was not in the mood to appreciate it. In the middle of the night, she carried a lantern and touched the herbs one by one. Carrying a heavy load, she staggered as she walked. There were mosquitoes and flies around her. Her delicate skin was bitten and swollen, and her hands were pricked. She did not rest for the whole night. Luo Tan burst into tears, but she couldn't help. She could only curse Qi Yan in her heart. Finally, it was the afternoon of the second day. Shen Miao wiped the perspiration off her forehead and placed the empty pole down for Qi Yan Taoist priest to take a look. Priest Qi Yan laughed, there is no need to look, you have done very well. He then took out a small box from his personal luggage and handed it over to Shen Miao. Shen Miao opened it to take a look and indeed saw a stalk of medicinal herb lying inside. This is the herb. Taoist priest Scarlet Flame smiled. You helped me heal all the red sleeve grass on the mountain, and I'll use it to heal your husband's injury. I will keep my promise. Luo Tan angrily said, this is a profit for you. Furen's persistence made this priest look at you in a new light. I hope that no matter what happens in the future, Furen will think of today's sincerity. If Furen had a little bit of luck, the insects would not have been completely removed and this herb would not be in Furen's hands. Many thanks for the priest's gift. Shen Miao was in a hurry to rush back. The moment she received the herb, she felt a deep weakness all over her body. She did not sleep all night, and these days she did not rest well. She was like a fully stretched bow, and now that she relaxed, she felt that her head was heavy and her feet light. Many thanks for the priest's gift. Luo Tan was very dissatisfied with this priest's strange request, and looking at Shen Miao's sorry state, her heart was very uncomfortable. Shen Miao was the calmest and most calm person in the Luo and Shen family, but now she was teased by others without any leeway to retaliate, making her very unreconciled. She said, Also hope that in the future the red sleeve grass will not have any more insects. In the future, there will not be anyone as kind as my youngest Biao sister, to be an herb farmer and do all the work in the mountain for you. Even those herb farmers would not do their best in one night. Taoist priest Scarlet Flame laughed out loud, that cannot be said. I and Furen have met 3 times, and this is only 2. There will still be one more time. Luo Tan's lips twitched, who wants to meet? She pulled Shin Miao and said, I will support you. Let's go down the mountain. She then said to Taoist priest Scarlet Flame, priest should also hurry up. One is still waiting for the thing to save lives. Taoist priest Scarlet Flame followed behind and looked at their backs. His gaze landed on Shin Miao's slightly staggering footsteps, and the smile on his face disappeared as a trace of pity flashed in his eyes. After a long while, he shook his head and spat out 2 words. Futile. Chapter 944. Shin Miao and Luo Tan returned to the initial thatched hut. Fennel and Star Anise stood under a locust tree and looked into the distance while Tsong Yang and Mo Qing sat under the tree hugging their swords with their brows furrowed tightly. Fennel suddenly said, they are here. Octagonal Aniseed hurried over and saw Luo Tan and Shin Miao following behind the strange Taoist priest. Luo Tan was still fine, but Shin Miao seemed to have tripped over somewhere. She was covered in mud and her hair was a mess. There was a strange smell coming from her. Fennel and Star Anise looked at each other and had the same thought. Star Anise asked, Furen, you are, just as Luo Tan was about to speak, Shin Miao pulled her sleeves. When she looked up, Shin Miao shook her head at her and swallowed the words that were about to come out of her mouth. Shin Miao said, let's go. Priest Qi Yen said, since you are in a hurry, there is no need to take the path that you came from. Let me show you a shortcut. He brought the few of them around and when they reached one side, there was an impressively endless farmland. In these crisscrossed farmland, there was a clearly visible path. Then you once said that the path that the siblings took had farmland and small paths. Now it coincided with the path in front of them. It seemed that the siblings did not take the path that Shin Miao and the rest came from but this path. Qi Yen said, you all follow this path straight ahead and you will be able to reach the exit. He then looked at Shin Miao and smiled, this priest once told Furen that Furen will face a calamity. Shin Miao looked at him calmly, priest is trying to say that the calamity is about to appear? The calamity is born in response to heaven's will and the mysteries of heaven cannot be revealed. The priest smiled mysteriously, however, not long later, this priest and Furen will meet again. At that time, one hoped that Furen can be like last night and remove all the bugs on the red sleeve grass. At that time, the calamity will have a chance to be resolved. His words were neither yin nor yang and were unclear. The others were confused and Shin Miao also did not understand. However, there wasn't much for him to do here right now. If he didn't make a mistake, including the time when he left and the night he stayed here, today was already the 6th day. That Yuan Guiwan would at best last for 10 days, moreover the old imperial physician said that Xia Jing Xing's poison had already started to spread and would be in danger in around 7 days. There was no time to linger. After saying goodbye to Qi Yen, Shin Miao and others walked on the path in the field. Just as Taoist priest Scarlet Flame had said, the path was much easier than the one they had walked in the forest the day before. When they were about to board the carriage, Fenxiang could not help but ask, Furen, what did that priest make you do? What happened last night? She looked at Shin Miao's sorry figure and could not believe that nothing happened. Shin Miao said, nothing much, it is more important to return first. They were the first to board the carriage and saw that Shin Miao was unwilling to talk more. Even though Fenxiang and the rest were suspicious, they were helpless. In addition, Xia Jing Xing's injuries could not be delayed and they quickly rode back. In the carriage, Luo Tan asked Shin Miao, Biao youngest sister, why did you not say anything? In Luo Tan's view, For Shen Miao to suffer so much because of Xia Jingxing, it was touching no matter what. Even if it was a husband and wife from an ordinary family, they would be able to do this for each other. A young lady from a noble family was willing to kneel down to be a herb farmer and do it for an entire night. Not everyone would be able to do that. Shen Miao suffered but did not tell others and instead hid it. What benefits was there in doing that? Doing all these is not for others to show off. Shen Miao said, moreover, if it were to spread out, it would damage the face of the residence of Prince Rui. This matter ends here and you must not tell others. Chapter 945. Luo Tan asked, even Prince Rui cannot know? Shen Miao nodded her head. Luo Tan said, I know. She then said to Shen Miao, you rest for a while first. After going back and forth, it would be tomorrow when one reaches Longyi. You were busy all night last night and did not rest at all. Now you look very haggard. Even if I help you to hide it, one would not be able to hide your appearance from others. Shen Miao nodded her head and closed her eyes as she leaned against the back of the carriage. After being busy all night yesterday, she was indeed sleepy and tired and was almost on the edge. There was no need to hold on and almost immediately fell asleep the moment she closed her eyes. She did not care about the jolting of the carriage. This night's sleep was very short and it seemed that she did not sleep for long before Shen Miao was shaken awake. When she opened her eyes, it was Octagon Anise looking at her. Furen, young Lady Luo has returned to the residence. Luo Tan also woke up and both of them jumped off the carriage. It was actually the morning of the second day and the sun was already high up in the sky. Shen Miao rubbed her forehead and when she saw that there was no one guarding the doors of Prince Rui's residence, her heart turned cold. The residence of the Prince of First Rank had always been heavily guarded and the guards at the door were people from Mou's army. Normally they were very strict but now that there was no one around, could it be that something happened? Luo Tan also saw it and had a bad premonition in her heart but she was afraid of making Shen Miao sad so she did not dare to say a word. It was Mo Qing who said, Furen, let's go in and take a look first. Song Yang and the rest were Xia Jingxing's subordinates and naturally had a worried expression. When they walked into the residence of the Prince of First Rank, they saw that it was empty and their hearts became more suspicious and uneasy. Shen Miao walked in a hurry and almost bumped into someone. That person jumped in shock and turned back to look but Shen Miao was stunned. Furen, you have returned. This person was Uncle Tang. Uncle Tang's clothes were in a sorry state and no longer had the usual astute look. Shen Miao quickly asked, what happened? Why is there no one in the residence? Furen, why did you only return now? One do not know how the news of Master's life hanging by a thread was spread out. These days there were many people probing openly and secretly. The residents wanted to help to hide it and the people from the imperial court also came over. It is really a mess. Ji Furen came several times to inquire about your whereabouts and also the emperor. Luo Tan said, youngest Biao's sister is also busy helping brother-in-law to look for that expert. Speaking of which, we have already gotten, right? Uncle Tang slapped his head. I forgot to tell you a piece of good news. Master is awake. Shen Miao and Luo Tan were stunned at the same time before Shen Miao asked, awake? Yes. Uncle Tang said, Furen may not know, but the night Furen left, Zhuzi's wounds suddenly split open, the poison could not be stopped no matter what. The imperial physicians in the palace all said that the Yuan Gui Yuan pill could not save Zhuzi's life. Even young Master Gao couldn't do anything about it. He said that in less than 2 days, Master will be in trouble. Uncle Tang's words were full of twists and turns. Everyone's heart sank. Luan was quick and could not help and could not and said. Wu, Li said. Tan was long and Ruk Ming. Luo, Ji Furen was anxious. Seeing that the entire Longyi kingdom knew about it, she simply posted a notice outside, asking for doctors who passed by to treat her mistress's illness. They would definitely reward them handsomely. Coincidentally, someone uncovered the notice and invited him in. He gave his master a medicinal herb, and young Master Gao refined the herb into a pill for his master to consume. His master's wounds gradually healed, and he even woke up in the wee hours of the morning. Young Master Gao and the imperial physician in the palace had seen that master's injuries were gradually recovering, and the poison was also cured. Chapter 946. Uncle Tang finished speaking in one breath and paused before sighing. Everyone said that master's life should not end like this. 2 years ago, others also said that master could not make it, but master managed to pull through. Now that it is like this, it is really heaven's benevolence, and it is also the late Empress who is blessing master from heaven. When Shen Miao heard that Xie Jingxing's poison had been cured, she was really relieved this time. Ba Jiao and the rest also patted their chests, and their suspended hearts were finally put back into their stomachs. Luo Tan looked at Shen Miao and thought that it was not easy for Shen Miao to obtain this stock of medicinal herb from that harsh and strange Taoist priest's hands, but now that medicinal herb was useless. Who asked that passerby to uncover this notice for no reason? But after thinking about it, that person still managed to cure Xie Jingxing and felt that there was nothing wrong with that person. It was just that looking at Shen Miao secretly felt that it was not worth it, and felt that Shen Miao had done so much for nothing. Uncle Tang said again, when master just woke up, he asked Furen where did Furen go. Furen did not allow this old servant to casually speak of this matter, and these days Furen did not return. This old servant was afraid that something would happen and was afraid that master's imagination would run wild and cause his injuries to worsen, so this was concealed. Shen Miao said, "You did very well." She didn't want others to know that she went to find Qi Yan. On the one hand, she was afraid of being taken advantage of by others. On the other hand, if a person was too sad about something, it would become an obvious weakness of that person. If one day others wanted to deal with Shen Miao, they only needed to lay their hands on Xie Jingxing. Shen Miao did not want to expose her weakness too early. Moreover, Shen Miao did not dare to be sure how Xie Jingxing would view her somewhat rash actions. She only wanted to wait for a few days when Xie Jingxing's injuries were better before explaining everything to him. "I will go and see him first," Shen Miao said. "Furen." Uncle Tang stopped her and said, "Master had just taken the medicine that Gentleman Gao brewed and is resting now. It is not good for Furen to go." Shen Miao muttered to herself and looked at Uncle Tang. Why is there not even a guard at the residence's entrance, and why is it so chaotic? There do not seem to be many people. What is going on? Uncle Tang smiled in shame and said, "Too many things have happened these days." This old servant actually forgot to tell Madam about this matter. Even though the entire Longyi knew that the master had been saved and that the master was safe and sound after walking through a life and death situation, Ji Furen and young Master Ji could not be at ease and had been staying in the Fu for the past few days. This old servant also concealed Madam's whereabouts from them, only saying that Madam went to find a doctor for help. As for the people who saved master's life, it can be considered as master's kindness. This old servant placed them in the residence. Today, master woke up and Ji Furen and the others also went to see him. That benefactor is now sitting in the hall of the mansion. Mrs. Ji and young Master Ji are all in the hall, saying that they want to reward him well. However, my benefactor is not someone who covets power. Previously, I wanted to give them a huge sum of money, but they refused. Then what does he want? Luo Tan asked. Didn't the results come out? If it is not to ask for something, why would he want to do it? Uncle Tang looked at Luo Tan and smiled. This old servant's heart is also puzzled. Ji Furen had asked the benefactor, and the benefactor said that he happened to pass by and coincidentally saw the results. He remembered that the benefactor's ancestors passed down a stock of spiritual herb that could cure 100 poisons. Thinking that this herb could save a life, he did not think much and came to our residence after the results came out. Luo Tan shrugged her shoulders, that is of noble character and unquestionable integrity. I am not able to do that. One have to weigh the things passed down from the ancestors. To save strangers that one has never met before. It really requires boldness. Uncle Tang also smiled, it is indeed so. Then he looked at Shen Miao and said, Ji Furen is also having a headache because of this matter and this old servant could not make a decision. But since Furen is back, it is good. Furen, come take a look and see what to give them. Chapter 947. Since they are the benefactors, I will go and meet them first. Shen Miao's eyes drooped down. Are they in the main hall now? Exactly. Uncle Tang said, this old servant is about to head over. Just nice, Furen can also head over. Shen Miao nodded her head and Luo Tan quickly followed. Along the way, Uncle Tang seemed to have suddenly thought of something and said, speaking of which, those two benefactors seem to have just arrived in Longyi and are not familiar with Longyi. They said that they are here to look for relatives. Ji Furen thought that in a few days' time, we will help the two of them out and our prince of first-rank residence can also contribute. It would be good if we could post some notices outside. Two benefactors? Shen Miao asked, why are there two? That is a pair of siblings. Uncle Tang smiled, their age is about the same as Furen's and they are also very outstanding. Ji Furen is warm-hearted and wanted to introduce some talented youths and young ladies to that pair of siblings. They look very sensible and after coming to our residence for a few days, they are getting along well with the servants in the residence. The servants in the residence of Prince Rui were all trained by Xia Jingxing from the MOU army and even if they were not from the MOU army, they were all people with firm minds. Shen Miao had been in the residence of Prince Rui for the past few days and saw that these people had their own rules and regulations. It was difficult for a person like Xia Jingxing who had no regard for rules and was undisciplined to train up a group of subordinates that were so strict to the point of self-abuse. And to be able to get along well with these people was not something that an ordinary person could do. No matter how warm-hearted one was, there would be a basic level of vigilance and boundaries between people, especially the people from the residence of Prince Rui. One did not know if it was Shen Miao's intuition, but she felt that this pair of benefactors were not simple. Luo Tan was curious, in that case, this pair of siblings are extremely good people. Approximately. Uncle Tang smiled, no matter what, to be able to save Master's life, one would be a guest of honor for life in the residence of Prince Rui. Just as they were speaking, they had already walked to the entrance of the main hall and upon entering, they saw Ji Furen and the three Darren sitting in the middle of the room. Ji Darren was talking to Ji Furen about something. Seeing Shen Miao following behind Uncle Tang, Ji Furen immediately stood up and quickly walked forward to say, Jiao Nyang, you're finally back. There were some Furens in the hall but Shen Miao had never seen them before. Shen Miao looked at Ji Furen with some doubt. Ji Furen noticed her gaze and said in a low voice, these are the Furens who came to visit Jingxing. It is not easy to send them back during the day so they can only sit here. Shen Miao understood that Xia Jingxing's position in Longyi was really delicate and his life and death was related to the life and death of many people in the imperial court. And to see if he was really dead, those court officials could not come forward and let their Furen come to see him in the name of comforting Ji Furen. Comforting was in name but seeing Xia Jingxing's injuries was real. Xia Jingxing woke up this morning and most likely these Furens specially rushed over to see if it was real or fake. Madam Ji said, where have you been these past few days? Housekeeper Tang said that you went to find a doctor, but he couldn't find you. I almost couldn't even deal with this group of people. You are finally back. At the end of the words, there was a little complaint, Jingxing is still not awake. I know that you are anxious, so you went to find a doctor, but no matter what, you should accompany your husband's side. When he woke up this morning, he was disappointed not to see you. Now your identity is not an official's young lady but the Wang Fei of the residence of Prince Rui. One must think of the cause and effect before doing things, as there are many eyes watching. Even though the words were not pleasant to hear, Shen Miao knew that Ji Furen was thinking for her. Moreover, it was reasonable that Ji Furen's blood relation was Xie Jingxing and not her, Shen Miao. Before the reason was explained, her action of leaving without saying goodbye was indeed overboard and unreasonable. Thus Shen Miao did not feel wronged by Ji Furen's words of criticism. Chapter 948. Ji Furen had just finished speaking to Shen Miao in a low voice when a matron in the hall looked at Shen Miao and said with a smile, "Qin Wang Fei has calculated. These few days when we came to visit, we did not see Qin Wang Fei. We thought that Qin Wang Fei was heartbroken because His Highness the First Prince was bedridden and thus did not come out. Our hearts were very worried and were afraid that something would happen. Now that we see that Qin Wang Fei is fine, we are relieved." These words were saying that Shen Miao was not qualified to be Rui Wang Fei. As a Wang Fei, her own husband was seriously injured in bed and she did not even show her face. She did not stay by the bedside and did not come out to meet the guests. Not only was her movements suspicious, she was also cold and heartless. Ji Furen's expression was somewhat ugly. Shen Miao smiled slightly and said to that Furen indifferently, "The family is in chaos and have troubled Furen to worry." The meaning behind her words was that she did not need to trouble an outsider to worry about her own residence's matters. Shen Miao was a person who would become stronger when meeting strong people. She had to be soft when dealing with Xie Jingxing, that kind of unfathomable person, but she did not need to think too much when dealing with a brainless female. Thus her words were especially sarcastic. That Furen was speechless. But when she turned sideways, her appearance was clearly exposed in front of everyone. One could only hear another Furen exclaiming, "Rui Wang Fei, what happened to you? Why are your clothes so dirty? Could it be that you fell?" Then she suddenly covered her nose and revealed an extremely uncomfortable look. Ji Furen and Ji Darren were surprised. Uncle Tang was also surprised and everyone's eyes in the hall focused on Shen Miao. Only then did they discover that Shen Miao's clothes were covered with mud and dust and was extremely dirty. Looking carefully, her hair seemed to be a little messy. Even though she had tidied it up, she still looked a little embarrassed. And there was a faint smell coming from her body, but it was like the smell of fertilizer. Those Furens originally did not like Rui Qin Wang Fei, this outsider, and now that there was a topic to talk about, they immediately started talking at once, saying if Shen Miao was anxious in her heart and made a mistake in her actions, or if she suddenly fell down or something. Luo Tan was fuming with anger as she heard it from behind. Only she knew how Shen Miao ended up in such a sorry state, but Shen Miao had warned her that this matter must not be spoken out. Uncle Tang was a little surprised. When he saw Shen Miao, he was preoccupied with official matters and neglected Shen Miao's appearance. Moreover, Shen Miao had always been dignified and noble and her dressing was meticulous. There was never a time when she did not care about her appearance. Embarrassment appeared on Ji Furen's face. Shen Miao was her niece-in-law and to say that Shen Miao was not was tantamount to ruthlessly slapping her face. In the midst of the whispers, Shen Miao's expression was the most indifferent as she did not feel that there was anything wrong with it. These madams were xenophobic and had never seen her as one of their own. For those who were picky, no matter how expensive she was dressed today, those people would not change their opinion of her. Therefore, she did not feel that her sorry state was very embarrassing in the eyes of the crowd. After all, in the future they would not have a relationship of sitting and drinking tea together. Just as Ji Furen wanted to say a few words to smooth things over, she suddenly heard a male's laughter coming from the outer hall. "Brother Li is really talented." I am unable to solve this 9 interlocking rings, but you managed to solve it in less than half an incense stick of time. Other than my third older brother, there is no one faster than you. It was Ji Yushu's voice. Following that, another voice sounded, and it seemed to be a young male's voice. It was very clear but also somewhat hoarse. When put together, it was somewhat special. That person said, "Brother Ji has given way. This one dare not be compared with His Highness Prince of the first rank." Chapter 949. Shen Miao's heart moved, and involuntarily, her heart suddenly tightened into a ball. That clear and hoarse voice was very familiar, but she could not remember who it was, but her soul trembled at this moment. She lowered her head to look at her own hands. The sleeves were very long and only the fingertips were exposed, but those white and tender fingertips that had a few bloodstains because of last night's busywork were trembling violently at this moment. In the next moment, Ji Yushu's voice sounded, "Do not say it like this. When my third older brother wakes up, he will definitely want the both of you to compete. Third older brother likes intelligent people the most, and if you go, third older brother will definitely appreciate it." The curtain of the main hall was lifted and 2 people walked out. Ji Yushu was at the front, and when he suddenly saw Shen Miao, he was surprised for a moment before disregarding the presence of all the Furins and walked over in 3 steps, "Sister-in-law." He then said softly, "You have returned. These days you were not around, and even when I asked Tai Yi, he was not willing to tell me. Where did you go?" Shen Miao did not answer his words, and her eyes stared fixedly at the person who was following closely behind Ji Yushu. It was a young male who looked to be in his early 20s. His facial features were very plain, so plain that one would not be able to see any special features, but inexplicably attracted one's gaze. This was because his entire body exuded the aura of an intelligent person. He was wearing a rosin-colored robe and green cloth boots. His pair of eyes were like the summer sun, warm and slightly tipsy, but with a faint fanaticism. Shen Miao's body tilted and almost fell down. Luo Tan's eyes and hands were quick to support her waist from behind, as she thought that she was too tired the night before and could not hold on any longer. Ji Furen saw her looking at that young man and said, "This is one of the benefactors who saved Jing Xing." Gentlemanly, the young man bowed to Shen Miao and smiled, "This one is Li Ku." Shen Miao shouted thousands of times in her heart. She would never forget this name and would never forget this pair of seemingly warm and innocent eyes. In just a few years, he had grown to become Fu Xiu Yi's left and right arm, and was able to stand up to Pei Lang as an equal, this Mei Furen's biological brother, Li Ku. She had never thought that after such a long life, she would be able to see the man in front of her again in this life. But in this strange country, in her mansion, in front of a room full of people, Li Ku had appeared so openly in front of her. Her face suddenly turned pale. On one hand, she rationally reminded herself that she couldn't do anything strange in front of these madams. On the other hand, she stared fiercely at Li Ku. She couldn't wait to rush up and tear this person into pieces, drink his blood and eat his flesh. Mei Furen and her brothers. The reason why she ended up in such a tragic state in her previous life was because of this pair of siblings. Mei Furen won Fu Xiu Yi's heart, and Li Ku's fowls and dogs rose to heaven. Li Ku was always at Fu Xiu Yi's beck and call, while Mei Furen leaned against a big tree to enjoy the shade and was even more favored. Both siblings relied on each other and were promoted. Mei Furen thought of ways to marry out Wan Yu, and Li Ku thought of ways to depose the crown prince. Mei Furen caused the first household of the Shen family to be exterminated, and Li Ku had a deep friendship with the second and third households Shen Gui and Shen Wan. This bad karma was something that could not be escaped in this lifetime. But Shen Miao did not think that it would be him who was Xie Jing Xing's benefactor. She suddenly remembered what Uncle Tang said, that is a pair of siblings. Shen Miao's fierce gaze made Ji Furen stunned for a moment. She asked, "Jiao Nyang, isn't there two benefactors? Shen Miao smiled gently and slowly moved her gaze away. In her tone of voice, there was a treachery that even she herself did not notice. Where is the other one? Just now the maid poured tea on her and I let her change her clothes. Jiao Nyang has a lot of clothes and there are no other female clothes in the residence. It is not good to take the maid's clothes, so I took Jiao Nyang's clothes to deal with it. Ji Furen said. Just as she was speaking, she saw Ji Yushu looking outside the door, coming. That female had a hibiscus face and a willow waist. Her appearance was comparable to a fairy. She wore a thin gown and slowly walked over. The noon sun came in because she pulled open the curtains, and it made this young lady even more beautiful. Her light smile was dazzling, and it was as if Shen Miao was separated by a lifetime, and saw the brilliance that she saw before her death. Shen Miao stood in the room with disheveled clothes and a pale face. The way she stared at that female was like a hungry wolf, like a fierce tiger, like a venomous snake lying in wait for an opportunity to strike. That person wore her clothes and came to her residence. She saved her husband and appeared in front of her with a swagger. The old enemy of the previous lifetime, the death enemy of this lifetime, the bad karma could not be cut off and was once again pushed to the edge of fate. Mei Nyang greets Princess Consort. The female said. Mei Nyang. No, you are not Mei Nyang. You are the blood of the Emperor of Ming-Chi, Fu Xiu-yi, the imperial consort of the new crown prince, Fu Ming. She is also my mortal enemy, Mei Furen. Chapter 950. Ji Furen smiled. This young lady is the one who took out the medicinal herb, young lady Li Mei. Shen Miao stared at her. The reason why Mei Furen was able to be favored in the inner palace for so many years was because Fu Sheng was able to stand firmly as the new crown prince. 3 palaces, 6 courtyards and 72 concubines, which one of them was easy to deal with? Fu Xiu-yi favored her alone, so she was not someone that an ordinary female could deal with. Those who were more beautiful than her were not as smart as her, and those who were smarter than her were not as beautiful as her. When it was time to advance, she would advance, and when it was time to retreat. She was obviously scheming, but she always gave others a feeling that she acted according to her nature. Arrogant but also guarded her own sense of propriety. She had beauty but knew when she was in her most beautiful posture. The concubines in the inner palace once discussed behind her back that if she wanted to, there was no man in this world that would not submit to her skirt. Just like at this moment, she came in wearing Shen Miao's clothes. Even if it was a dignified and somewhat conservative dress, it was worn by her in a lively manner and naturally made Shen Miao look even more wretched. Mei Furen had a pair of extremely charming eyes, like a cat that woke up in the afternoon with a careless laziness. Shen Miao's gaze on her was too strange that she could not help but look at Shen Miao. She was rather surprised, but it was just right at a point where it would not be rude. Her surprise was caught by Ji Furen and Ji Yushu, who were closest to her. Both of them looked at Shen Miao at the same time and were startled when they saw Shen Miao's eyes. But in the next second, Shen Miao lowered her head, and when she raised her head again, it changed into a smiling expression, as if those were all an illusion. It is a neat person, Shen Miao said softly. Uncle Tang could not help but frown. Shen Miao's words were like those in the palace. No, those main wives in the residence were picky and contemptuous towards their newly married concubines. But Shen Miao was not an unreasonable person. She did not even put Lu Wanner's matter in her heart, so how would she be sensitive to be jealous of a person that she had just met for the first time? Luo Tan sighed in her heart. Previously, Uncle Tang had said that the pair of siblings were also very outstanding. When she saw Li Ku, she didn't think much of it and felt that he was at most passable. Only when she saw Li Mei did she know what it felt like to be outstanding. Luo Tan had always felt that among all the females she knew, the most unique was Shen Miao. Putting aside her looks, Shen Miao had a dignified and imposing air in her bones, which was a beauty that any female would envy. This Li Mei, however, had a completely different feeling. If one were to say that Shen Miao was a blooming peony, the king of the flowers, then this female would be a poppy. She had a strong temptation, charm, beauty, and there was a trace of unexplainable evil beauty. Shen Miao said, "Is young Lady Li from the Great Liang?" "Exactly." Li Mei looked at Shen Miao in surprise and smiled, just arrived at Longyi. "Miss Li and brother Li are from Qinzhou." Madame Ji laughed, "As soon as I arrived at Longye, I exposed the notice at the city gates and saved Jing Xing's life." "Just arrived and you exposed the notice?" Shen Miao looked at Li Mei with a smile that was not a smile. "This should be saying that your highness is lucky? Or is it that young Lady Li is lucky?" This time everyone in the room could hear the hostility in Shen Miao's voice. Li Mei was also startled. Li Ku took a step forward and smiled as he bowed to Shen Miao. "Since His Highness the Prince of First Rank is fine, this one and older sister will leave first. These days in the residence there have been many disturbances and have offended." This Li Ku's words were neither servile nor overbearing. It was as if he had heard Shen Miao's words and acted out of anger due to his pride. Ji Furen was stunned for a moment and did not have the time to ask Shen Miao what was going on. She subconsciously wanted to embrace Li Ku and Li Mei. "What disturbances? You have saved Jing Xing's life, how can it be said that one has offended? Speaking of which, we have not repaid." Chapter 951. But Li Mei smiled and said, "Ji Furen had already told you before that it was a coincidence that we came here to take down the results and did not think too much at that time. This herb is used to detoxify and save people's lives. Us siblings did not use it, so it was a waste to hold on to it. Things that can save people naturally have to be used to save people. This can only be considered that this herb and His Highness Prince of First Rank are fated. As for the rest, one cannot say more." When the other Furens in the hall heard this, they clicked their tongues in wonder. She was beautiful and had a good temperament. It was rare that she was generous and did not covet power. She looked like a good person, but on the contrary, Shen Miao inexplicably made things difficult for others. She did not have the bearing of a Prince Rui's consort. Li Mei then looked at Shen Miao and said apologetically, "It is just that this commoner's clothes were dirty just now, thus wearing Wang Fei's clothes. One hoped that Wang Fei would not mind. After this commoner has washed it clean, one would definitely return it to Wang Fei personally and there would not be a trace of wearing it." Shen Miao looked at her fixedly. When Shen Miao saw Mei Furen, it was after she returned to Ming Qi from the Qin country. She had long expected that there would be many more concubines in the palace, but the only one who gave birth to a son was Mei Furen alone. At first she did not believe that Fu Xiuyi's cold temperament would dote on a female, but after seeing it with her own eyes, she had no choice but to admit it. Mei Furen was deeply doted on by Fu Xiuyi, so from the start when she faced Shen Miao, she never lowered her head. Even when she lowered her head, it was a fake, perfunctory, and one that did not have a trace of happiness. Even if Shen Miao was the Empress, in the inner palace, it seemed that Mei Furen was a head higher than her, just like how Fu Sheng was always more doted on than Fu Ming. And right now, that woman who always gently raised her chin and looked at her with ridicule, actually had a humble attitude and called herself a commoner girl, and called her princess. How big was the world, so big that one's life could be repeated twice. How small was the world, so small that after 2 lifetimes, one could still meet enemies from the previous lifetime. Li Mei saw that Shen Miao did not reply and was somewhat embarrassed. She smiled and wanted to pull Li Ku away. Ji Furen wanted to persuade her, but in the end Shen Miao was the matriarch of the residence and she had no reason to make a decision without Shen Miao. "Wait," Shen Miao suddenly said. Li Ku and Li Mei were surprised for a moment before both of them turned their heads over and saw Shen Miao smiling gently like water. She said, Since one saved His Highness' life, one is the benefactor of the entire residence of Prince Rui. If the two of you leave now, won't the Rui Qinhuang residence be criticized by others and be said to be cold-hearted? How can you say that the Wang Fu is cold-hearted? Li Mei shook her head and smiled. This is our idea. One must wait for His Highness to recover before leaving. Shen Miao smiled gently, otherwise, the residence of the prince of first rank cannot afford to give up halfway. There was some doubt in the meaning of these words. If the legendary medicinal herb that was passed down was actually fake, then Xia Jingxing's old illness would relapse in a few days. At that time, where would he go to find him? Ji Furen and Ji Yushu were somewhat embarrassed. Shen Miao was not an overbearing person, so why was she so harsh towards this pair of siblings? They were the benefactors, and no matter what, one could not use this kind of attitude. Even if there were suspicions in one's heart, there was no need to say it out loud. But Shen Miao knew that this pair of siblings would not stay because of the gratitude of the residents of the prince of first rank, but they would definitely stay because of the suspicions of the residents of the prince of first rank. Because in their life, they wanted to leave a good name after doing all the bad things and would not allow themselves to have a stain. How could they allow others to pour a basin of dirty water on them for no reason? Sure enough, when the words were said, Li Ke's face revealed an indignant expression as he said, "Do not worry. We will definitely be here and personally witness His Highness the Prince of First Rank recover." Chapter 952. Shen Miao smiled gently. That is good. The residence of the Prince of First Rank owes you such a favor. If one do not stay, how can we repay? One moment she was suspicious and the next moment she was talking about repayment. This kind of ambiguous attitude made one somewhat unable to make heads or tails of it. Li Mei looked at her thoughtfully and Shen Miao noticed her gaze and smiled again. I still have some matters and will not accompany everyone here. She then said to Ji Furen, Imu, help me to look for and bring along all the Furens. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly thought of something and stopped in front of Li Mei. He said with a smile, I also think that this dress suits you very well, as if it was made for you. Since it fits you, there is no need to take it off and return it to me. Just take it as a gift from me. Shen Miao said to gift clothes, but it did not seem to be gifting clothes. It was as if she was bestowing something. Even though Uncle Tang was usually slick, he was somewhat confused by Shen Miao's inexplicable actions. It was only after Shen Miao left that he looked at Luo Tan. Luo Tan stuck out her tongue, do not ask me. I also do not know. She then turned around and left. Ji Furen looked at Li Mei and Li Ke with some shame. These days the princess has been worrying about Prince of First Rank's illness and most likely is somewhat sensitive. One hoped that both of you can be more understanding. One can naturally understand the heart of a fist. Li Mei smiled. Then let us go inside first to talk. Ji Furen smiled. Ji Yushu also looked at Li Ke and hesitated for a moment before saying, older brother Li, please. Shen Miao returned to the room and when Jingzhe and Guyu saw her return, they first went up in surprise. Furen, you have finally returned. These days these servants have been anxious and feared that something bad happened to you. When they saw Shen Miao in a sorry state, both of them were stunned at the same time. Jingzhe asked, Furen, what is going on? Did you suffer from any grievances? Shen Miao's clothes were dirty and messy and her expression was strangely ugly. Upon closer inspection, there seemed to be a sense of loss, as if she had suffered a huge blow. It was still Guyu who was quick-witted and said, Furen, this servant will first prepare some water for you. You should first wash up and then drink a bowl of hot porridge. Left and right highness are fine and after you have a good rest, it is not too late to slowly think about things. She then pulled Jingzhe to prepare some hot water for Shen Miao. After the hot water was prepared, Shen Miao sent the two away and sat in the wooden bucket. And the water was just warm, but at this moment Shen Miao felt that it was as cold as ice. Why would Mei Furen appear in the Great Liang? How did she become Xie Jingxing's savior? By a freak combination of factors. She had endured untold hardships to not kill Mei Furen the moment she saw her. It was also because this was the residence of Prince Rui and she was unable to explain her actions. But no matter how, no, and, her, she, her. Shen, in. She, I, and I, rank, you, Shen, you, and. In the previous life, Shen Miao went to the Qin country to be a hostage, and when she returned, Mei Furen had already entered the palace. One heard that Mei Furen was the daughter of an official that Fu Xiuyi met during the Eastern expedition, but now that Fu Xiuyi had not started the Eastern expedition, naturally he would not be able to meet Mei Furen, and now Mei Furen was in the Great Liang. Could it be that in the previous life, Mei Furen was also in the Great Liang? According to this time, Mei Furen had not met Fu Xiuyi and had already met Xie Jingxing. Then why did Mei Furen finally become Fu Xiuyi's favored concubine, and why did she come to Mingqi? Could it be that this was also Xie Jingxing's intention? Shen Miao could not help but shiver. Chapter 953. In her previous life, she and Xie Jingxing did not meet and did not follow Xie Jingxing to Longyi. Xie Jingxing also did not come to the Ming Qi's tribute banquet. Shen Miao was Fu Xiuyi's wife and Xie Jingxing was unconscious in Longyi like now. Mei Furen and her siblings who were passing by saved him, so they should not have a hostile relationship. If Mei Furen was originally a Great Liang person, but at the end became the favored concubine of the Ming Qi emperor, could it be that she was also a spy? Just like how Xie Jingxing was obviously a prince of the Great Liang but became the little marquis of the residence of the Marquis of Linan in Ming Qi's Ding capital. Could it be that Mei Furen was a spy sent by the Great Liang? But in this case, Mei Furen did not need to give birth to Fu Sheng for Fu Xiuyi and finally made Fu Sheng the crown prince. Her brows knitted tighter and tighter, but compared to that, what made her most afraid was whether Mei Furen and Xie Jingxing were allies in the previous lifetime. If in the previous lifetime Mei Furen was the person that the Great Liang's imperial family sent to Ming Qi, no matter what, Shen Miao's ending was inextricably linked to the Great Liang's imperial family. Fu Ming and Wan Yu that could never be redeemed, then how would she and Xie Jingxing deal with each other? As she was lost in her thoughts, Shen Miao did not even know when the water in the wooden bucket turned cold. It was Jingzhe who could not let it go and came over to knock on the door to call her. Only then did Shen Miao leave. When she touched the water, it was strangely cold. She wiped herself clean, put on her clothes and went out. The first thing she saw was Luo Tan. Luo Tan came forward and asked, "Biao youngest sister, do you not like that Li Mei?" Shen Miao said, "Why say so? You're always very polite to people. But this Li Mei is very strange, just like how he treated Chang Ziqing." Luo Tan thought about it, that Chang Ziqing was not a good person at the end. Could it be that this Li Mei is also not one? Speaking of which, one always feel that you do not like this Li Mei more than Chang Ziqing. Shen Miao was twisting her hair with a handkerchief as she lightly said, "If I say that she is a bad person, would you believe it? Is she really a bad person?" Luo Tan was stunned. "But she doesn't look like one." Shen Miao shook her head. No matter what she said, before there was any evidence, everything was useless. She said, "Are you going back?" Luo Tan was startled. "Aren't you going to see brother-in-law?" Shen Miao paused and said, "Today one is very tired and want to sleep early." "All right." Luo Tan nodded. You've been running around for a long time these past few days. You've lost a lot of weight. Why don't you take a good rest? I won't disturb you anymore. After thinking, he said, if you feel that there is something wrong with that Li Mei, you can also tell me. In this great Liang, only we have the same blood in our bones. After Luo Tan left, Shen Miao's face turned cold and said to Jingzhe, call Mo Qing over for me. It was rare for her to be this serious, especially today. There was a faint murderous aura that made Jingzhe and Guyu not dare to ask any more and went out to look for people without a second word. Mo Qing quickly walked in and Shen Miao got people to close the door tightly. When there was no one else around, she asked Mo Qing, where is that pair of siblings currently staying in the residence? Mo Qing thought that Shen Miao had something important to instruct him and was slightly startled when he heard it before saying, staying in an empty room in the side courtyard. You kill them for me. Shen Miao said. Mo Qing was stunned. Ever since he started following Shen Miao, Mo Qing had always seen Shen Miao's situation and it was not too much to describe it as abyss of fire. There would always be people scheming and people shooting arrows everywhere. In such an environment, Shen Miao had never suffered a loss before. She instructed Mo Qing to do this and that, and actually it was a tooth for a tooth and an eye for an eye, but it was the first time that she directly said, you kill them for me. Chapter 954. Mo Qing looked at Shen Miao and hesitated for a while before asking, Furen, they have a feud with me, a blood feud that is absolutely irreconcilable. If we don't get rid of these two, there will be endless troubles in the future. Kill them for me, she said. Before Mo Qing could answer, a voice was heard from outside the window, this is not a good plan. Both of them looked back and saw that Jingzhe had left in a hurry and did not even close the window. Coincidentally it was dark in the evening and one did not know when there was someone in front of the window but it was Pei Lang. Shen Miao gestured for him to come in. Pei Lang walked in and glanced at Mo Qing before shaking his head at Shen Miao, rashly killing is not a good strategy. Shen Miao coldly stared at him. Mei Furen's appearance made her recall the dark days in the past and she did not have a good expression towards Pei Lang. Pei Lang rubbed his nose in confusion. He coughed twice and said, that pair of siblings are currently living in the Princess Fu. If you kill them now, the Princess Fu will not be able to escape responsibility. Such a large prince's residence with countless guards couldn't even protect the lives of a pair of brother and sister. Do you think others would believe it? They will only say that it was done by someone from the prince's residence. Secondly, what you did outside today was too much. You probably don't know, but there are rumors outside that you are jealous of Li Mei's beauty and deliberately made things difficult for her. Previously, I didn't know why you were like this, but now that I heard that you have a grudge against them, I understand. Since you have enmity with them, you shouldn't show it. Once you show it and let others see it, if something happens to the siblings, the first person to be suspected will be you. Third, you found Mo Qing to kill for you. This shows that you do not trust others, including Prince Rui's subordinates. But was Mo Qing really a match for the other guards in the residence? Even if Mo Qing's martial arts skills were higher, it would be difficult for two fists to fight against four hands. Normally when one was caught, Prince Rui would definitely ask you the reason. You let Mo Qing take action but did not tell Prince Rui, so there must be a reason that could not be told to others. If you're discovered, you won't be able to keep your secret. Therefore, this plan is not a good one, Pei Lang said in one breath. Shen Miao stared at him for a while and suddenly laughed. Mr. Pei, are you always so rational? Without waiting for Pei Lang to speak, he laughed coldly, that's true. If you aren't rational and aloof, how can you be above others? Pei Lang did not understand her words and only heard Shen Miao speaking again, what you said is right. It is indeed so. I cannot rashly kill people in the residence of a prince of Qin. Moreover, to let them die so easily, it would be too easy for these two people. Mo Qing did not speak, so Shen Miao said to him, "You go out and help me to investigate clearly first. I want to know clearly the background of this pair of siblings, no matter big or small." Mo Qing complied and left. Shen Miao took a deep breath. The enemy was right in front of her, but she could not make a move now. This kind of heart-wrenching feeling was really uncomfortable, and it almost made her want to vent her anger on others. Mo Qing complied and went out. Pei Lang looked at Shen Miao and thought for a while before asking, "You have deep resentment towards this pair of siblings?" Shen Miao sneered, "Why do you say such words? One have never seen that you want to take someone's life the moment you come." He looked at Shen Miao with some probing. "This shows that you have fear and guard against them in your heart. This pair of siblings are very powerful." Shen Miao's heart jumped as she looked at Pei Lang in front of her. Anger rose in her heart and she asked, "Teacher Pei is always able to understand the thoughts of others. Then do you know what kind of deep enmity I have with them? Are you willing to tell me?" You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.